Ooh, hello there. I guess we don't have a final call because, well, how much of that game do we really want to hear from last night? We're going to hear from a bit of it. Welcome into the Orange and Black Weekend Wrap. Sam Lutman here alongside Dan Devone after the Giants got absolutely shellacked by the Athletics last night in the state capitol. 11-2 is the final score, and it was definitely not as close as that final score would indicate. Giants getting a couple of, hey, at least you tried runs late in that one. Got a Brett Wisely home run in the 8th inning that no one's really going to ever care about. Justin Verlander falls to 0-6 on the season, a 4.84 ERA now after falling to the Athletics, a team that, by and large, he's always had a very successful track record against, and I just don't know what you do with Justin Verlander now at this point. So we'll talk about that, talk a little bit about that absolute disaster class of a game last night. And also Bob Melvin, got some news about him this week. He had his contract option for next year picked up. We will dive into that as well. A lot of, I would say fun stuff, but no, this is not going to be one of the more funner topic-filled shows. Dan, how you doing this morning?
I'm well. You know, we've had a lot of sort of unexpected Giant games throughout the season. I didn't see that one coming. After playing so well the last 2 games out in Arizona, especially offensively. Now, I know it was Arizona. You're going into that Mickey Mouse ballpark, and then you get waxed. You're down 9-0 before you know what the hell's going on. I could not foresee what took place last night.
No, and again, it's, Justin Verlander, we're looking at Verlander here, and this is 2 starts in a row now against the White Sox and the A's, 2 teams that aren't very good, 2 teams that he has very good track records against, and 2 starts where he wasn't looking awful in those starts. Even last night, he was hitting 95 on the gun, but he was just leaving his stuff up, and the A's were just teeing off of him. They got a run on him in the first, and then it all just fell apart in the second, and he ends up only able to give the Giants 3 innings, 6 runs allowed, 5 strikeouts, and a walk, but you said it right there, Dan, after those 2 games in Arizona, which, again, 2 wins, or it was two uplifting wins, I would say, the Giants had in the desert after just some absolute horrific work there offensively. And all that goodwill just seemed to just go away last night. All those good feelings just, poof, gone.
Well, we can go after Verlander, and rightfully so. At least I will. But the offense doesn't get a pass. The offense was bad once again. And even if Verlander was good, they got 2 runs for him. Even if Verlander was on point, that offense once again disappeared, and they continue. Just when you thought they had turned a corner in Arizona, they go right back to who they had been predominantly over the last 2 months. And that's an offense that just simply cannot square anything up and cannot score big numbers in any consistent way.
Well, last night it was a familiar reason for the Giants' offensive struggles going against J.P. Sears, who got the win. He improves to 7-7, and Dan, he is that ultimate bugaboo for the Giants. He is a lefty, and you know how those lefty starters just have completely flummoxed the Giants this year. And J.P. Sears, he's not a bad pitcher. He's an all right pitcher. I mean, his numbers look kind of gross this year, obviously, when you're pitching in a minor league ballpark that is Sutter Health Park, but. Yeah, Sears, great night from him. 6 innings pitched, no runs allowed, struck out 6. He looked about as good as he did and as good as he has all year long. And, that first inning, right off the bat, you start to feel bad you start to get a bad feeling about this team because, Kruk and Kuip, they're on the broadcast, and Kuiper was talking about how the batter's eye at Sutter Health Park can be difficult for the hitters. And I'm watching where Sears is releasing the ball. And where Sears is releasing the ball with his left hand, it's going to be backlit by the sun splashing on the wall out there in center field. Because the way the shadows were, they were kind of cutting across the infield, where the infield was in shadow and the outfield wall was in the sun. And where the ball was coming from, it was going to be having that, the sun backdrop right behind it, which I could think, what might make the ball a little bit difficult to see. And, Willie Adames in his first at-bat, he saw 6 pitches and he swung at 0 of them and ended up striking out. And I wonder if he could even see that ball at all. And then Justin Verlander comes out. He's throwing from the other side. There's not as much sun backdrop on his release point, and the A's start teeing off on him right away. And then it's like, well, okay, is there a backdrop issue or not? regardless if that was the case or not, they allowed J.P. Sears to get into a real groove early on in that game, and the Giants were cooked at that point.
Yeah, I would give maybe the backdrop a little bit more credibility if this is a Giant team that has been hitting over the last couple of months.
Seems like every backdrop seems to do this to them. Exactly.
And the same thing with Verlander. I think Verlander, I want to say he threw the most first ball strikes, which is something that he was very conscious of getting into the last night's game. And he was throwing his fastball, and he was locating it. The problem is that I don't know if it's age, but there is no movement on that thing. And you throw a major league hitter. Now, I don't want to sound like Johnny Baseball like I played in the MLB, but I've seen enough baseball where I can tell you that if you come up in the zone, I don't care how hard you're throwing it, Major League Baseball players, even though they play in a minor league park like that of the Oakland A's, are going to tattoo you. And that's exactly what they did. And I don't think it was any fluke. That is just Verlander giving you meatballs up in the zone and a consistent diet of it.
Mm-hmm. And the A's absolutely were pouncing on it. And it's just I don't know what you do with Verlander at this point, because as you said, Dan, the stuff is there. Like, he's throwing 95, he's hitting his marks, he's throwing the ball where he wants to throw it. But what the A's are doing, again, they just weren't fooled by anything that he was throwing at him, that he was throwing at them yesterday. And they took advantage of it early on, put the Giants down in a massive 5-0 hole. And, of course, they didn't get any help from the defense, too. Elliot Ramos, he kind of fumbled the ball out there a couple times. He had a couple times to reach out the ball in the exchange, which allowed the A's to take an extra base there and
score a run.
Keep run scoring there. I think Brent Rooker, both of his doubles happened because Elliot Ramos couldn't cleanly field the ball. And that's something that, unfortunately, keeps rearing its ugly head. The new kid, Sergio Alcantara, who was brought up, made his Giants debut. He kicked the ball around a little bit as well. It was just, a lot of just more messy defense. Brett Wisely made an error as well. It was just, the Giants just basically fell back into all of their bad habits that you like to think that they were kind of moving away from. And no, last night showed that those bad habits are still very much alive, well, and kicking.
And I'm one that believes that when you play like that, it's a result of bad coaching, and in this instance, bad managing. Now, I know that's a mouthful for a guy that got re-upped in Bob Melvin, but I do want to talk about it because I'm just a firm believer that details matter, and there's some coaches that from day one emphasize that is not tolerant, right? We have a zero policy for what you're doing, Elliot Ramos, and they become more conscious of it. Same with base running mistakes. Now, you can blame it on Matt Williams. You can point a finger at Pat Burrell, but who hires those guys? Who creates the culture? It's Bob Melvin. And I'll just harken back to, because I know a lot of people are out on Gabe Kapler. One thing about Gabe Kapler, almost to a fault, he was such a detail-oriented guy. I mean, everything.
They're very meticulous.
Very meticulous, right down to base running and right down to defense, although their defense was good at times and better at others. And also,
I'll push back a little bit there because the base running had issues too.
Did.
Gabe Kapler was very meticulous on the details, but there was a lot that just kind of made it worse though on the times when they weren't as buttoned up as of a team. And there was a lot of times where Giants were facing pitchers when Gabe Kapler was running the show, and the hitters just looked absolutely unprepared for what they were seeing. Like they looked like they were expecting one sort of approach from this pitcher, and they got something completely different. They just looked completely lost. So, Gabe Kapler was detail-oriented, but there was a lot of times where even his teams just looked completely unprepared, much like the Giants did last night.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I don't think that this is very different, this year's version of the Giants, than what it is we saw the last couple of years from Gabe Kapler. And I would argue that this is a better starting lineup. So we can get into Bob Melvin, which I clearly welcome that conversation, but just to once again to revisit last night's game, I think now pitching becomes a concern.
Absolutely.
It
is.
With Hayden Birdsong and now Verlander, we sort of, yes, hitting is something that they need to certainly deal with. I'm a believer that I'm very optimistic that the offense actually is going to get better, as ridiculous as that sounds. I do implore all of you out there, you Giant fans, to have a little patience, because Casey Schmidt will be back. Chapman will be back. I think Adames is showing signs, and there's nowhere to go up for players like Bailey and Jung Hoo Lee. I do think the offense will be better. I think the concern now is the back half of that pitching staff.
Which is wild. A month ago, we were feeling so good about this team's pitching, and the hitting was the issue. Now, all of a sudden, to your point, Dan, yeah, you're absolutely correct. The hitting is looking a lot better. Willard Dibs has quietly, over the last 23 games, hit 300 at the plate. He is looking like he is starting to finally arrive, heat up, and show up. And that would be a massive development for this team. They are expected to get Matt Chapman back this evening. He played a rehab game last night, and clearly one rehab game was enough. And the plan is to insert him into the lineup tonight. So hopefully that'll give the lineup just some more structure there, and that will be better off for this team. But hopefully Chapman can hit the ground running, because they need offensive help from wherever they can get it. Adames heating up, that would be great. Jung Hoo Lee had a very promising game on Thursday night in Arizona that I thought he could build off of. Had his first 3-hit game since May 6th, I believe. And then last night goes 0 for 4 with a strikeout. So kind of regresses there in a sense, and had a really bad defensive miscue. Was in the 6th inning trying to chase down a Denzel Clark fly ball. Ends up losing it. Clark gets a triple out of it. And that ends up being another run there for the A's. Ends up starting a 3-run rally for the A's in that inning, which again, at that point, the Giants were down 6-0. The game was more or less over at that point, but you could at least, talk yourself into. Well, at one point on the broadcast, Elliot Ramos steps up with runners on first and third, and Kuiper's like, oh, you're one swing away from a 6-3 game. We'll see what happens. It's like, stop it. Stop. We know that's not going to happen. And, yeah, so Jung Hoo Lee, though, the defensive miscue there, the defense in general, again, last night, it's just one of those games, like, can we just get something to work? Can we get someone to hit? Can we get someone to field? Can we get someone to pitch? No, we're going to go 0 for 3 in those sectors. And then, of course, we had more horrific situational hitting, too, with the 4th and 5th innings. The Giants had first and second no out and got 0 runs. It was just complete system failure all around for the Giants last night.
Yeah, just to start with the defense, first of all, Alcantara, that's a guy you're never going to see again. That's out of
that might have been his one game. Yeah.
That's no Casey Schmidt. That's no Christian Koss. Koss, by the way, suddenly was your best hitter when he went down. And I think that the Giants that was out of complete need, the reason that you saw that young man. I think Willie Adames, to go along with his hitting, I think the defense has been much better. And I think that's worth noting. With Adames, who wasn't doing anything really well early on in the season, not only was he not hitting, but he couldn't play defense either. I think both of those have sort of rounded into shape over the last couple of weeks. I'm optimistic about the offense, as I just mentioned. The defense, I just have no answer for. I think Elliot Ramos is a hitter. I think we're beginning to recognize that, right? Like, he is a hitter, and his defense is just something that you're going to have to sort of grin and bear it. And I think a lot of good hitters in this league, unfortunately. Devers was one of those guys that, like, well, listen, we can't take his bat out of the lineup. We have a DH, so Elliot Ramos is going to play one of the corner outfield spots. But he's never been a good fielder.
No, and yeah, again, so Adames has come around. But yeah, Ramos, I feel like it's just going to be one of those things where you're just going to have to kind of grin and bear it unless they can work with him. This is probably a spring training thing they're going to have to work with him on in terms of improving his defense out there. Look, the Giants have had success in the past while getting very little to no defense from their left fielders. Again, this is the organization that once had Barry Bonds standing out in left field and guys like Rajai Davis, Jason Ellison, and Jeffrey Hammonds patrolling 2/3 of the outfield to compensate. This is the same organization that once, let's just plop Travis Ishikawa in left field, even though he's never played there before, and just have him hold that position for the most important games of the year. So this organization has gotten by with shoddy defense out in left field, but when you see it happen last night like it did, when it's one thing to not be able to get to a fly ball in time. It's another thing to misplay a fly ball here and there every now and then, which even great fielders, that happens. We saw it happen with Jung Hoo Lee last night. But when you're dropping the ball, just trying to exchange it from glove to hand, like, dude, what are we doing here at that point? Like, come on. Like, you got to be at least better than that. There's been balls that have bounced out of his glove. There's balls that kicked off his glove. It's just, there are times out there where Elliot Ramos' defense is almost Little League-esque. And it will look the other way as long as he is hitting. He's probably going to be an all-star again this year. He should be an all-star again this year. but he's far away from any sort of Gold Glove debates right now.
Well, I think it's part of the maturation process, if you will, that somebody, whether it's his agent, whether it's a manager, has got to blow in his ear and say, listen, you're still a young man, but if you want to be a complete baseball player, and really what sort of hits home with these guys, if you want to get paid and you really want to get paid, then you've got to pay attention to things that are correctable. Like, you have to put an emphasis and put the work in defensively. Because to me, this isn't about angles. This isn't about getting back on balls. This is just sort of like you're checking out mentally.
It's an effort thing.
And I think that's fixable. And conversely, I think part of the reason why I'm tolerant of Yastrzemski is because he plays a good right field defensively. And his numbers he's like a 250 hitter.
He's a streaky hitter.
Yeah. And his 750, 730 OPS is what it is. But he's the sort of guy that, especially when you think about playing at Oracle, much like that of the catcher's position, right field is where you need a defender. You can't just, the idea of like when Luciano was toiling in the outfield in Sacramento, let's just put him out in right field.
No, this is not a simple right field here.
You don't do that. And that's why I think on the other end of the spectrum, while Yastrzemski makes sense, and I'm willing to swallow Yastrzemski, even though a lot of people are like, I need more out of that guy. No, his defense certainly makes up for whatever it is that you're expecting in terms of the offense from that guy.
No, absolutely. I agree with you there. And yeah, I think he's probably the best defensive right fielder the Giants have had at Oracle Park. And they've had some good ones. I mean, obviously, again, Jose Cruz.
You always have that sense of security when there's a ball hit that way.
Exactly. No, I feel like Randy Wynn played that right field about as good as you could have asked anyone. Hunter Pence knew that right field very well, but he was kind of limited as a defender.
Bad arm.
Not the greatest arm either. Mike Yastrzemski's got the arm. He's got the know-how. He knows how to play that right field. You always feel secure with him out in right field. So, yeah, that allows you to kind of put up with the streakiness that he has to a degree, as long as he's not your, cleanup hitter. But with Elliot Ramos, this is a guy who, they're talking about, there are talks, whispers, nothing I think would say is concrete or official, about him potentially getting an extension soon. He's getting up to that point where he's going to start getting his arbitration eligible seasons or eligible years, and the Giants are going to want to lock him up long term. This is the guy who they look at as a key part of their future core. And they do have a legitimate core here together right now with with Adames, with Chapman, with Devers, with Logan Webb. Like, they got a truly good veteran core here, Jung Hoo Lee as well. And Elliot Ramos, they're going to want him to be the younger end of this core that they're going to be rolling with here for the next several years. And if they're going to give him that extension, they need to know that if they're going to tie themselves to this guy, that it's going to be worth it. The defense, again, that is correctable. The effort is correctable, because it's not just the defense for me, Dan. There's been times where he's got, the slow grounders, the third base, and he's jogging like he's been a 20-year vet. It's like, dude, you're still on your first contract. You're still on your rookie deal. Like, you got to be running these ground balls out. Third baseman drops the ball or overthrows or something like that. You could cost yourself a potential infield single or an extra base because you're not running hard enough. Things like that, those little things like that from Ramos, they start to add up. And then when you have a night like last night, they're going to bubble up to the surface and kind of come to a head as they are right now.
Yeah, he still has 5 years where he's under team control. He's not a free agent until 2030.
So yeah, he's not going anywhere for a while.
No, but maybe he's aware of that. Maybe there's also a feeling that he has the leverage, because what are you going to do? I'm the only guy who can hit on this baseball team, And he's right to a certain degree, but he does. I really, when I see that sort of stuff, it's analogous to football teams, and when teams jump off sides and make silly mistakes that are correctable, then it just gets back to me to coaching and management. And I do want to get into Bob Melvin, because a lot of this is getting a little bit ugly, because it's sort of the intangible stuff. Like, it's the base running, it's the defense. I know we can go after Elliot Ramos, but I'm telling you, when there's a structure, I remember I used to do the Mike Holmgren show, and he said, listen, we may lose games, but we will never shoot ourselves in the foot. Thank you very much. And that team every single year committed the least number of penalties in the NFL. So I know that it can be done. It's just a matter of whether there's an emphasis there in terms of the powers that be, or from a managerial standpoint. I'm not the biggest Bob Melvin fan, so I was a little surprised. I don't like the way, things ended out in San Diego, where he had one of the most talented team with Snell and Tatis and all those boys, and he was 2 games over 500. I know there was, I don't mean to revisit all this. I know there was issues with Preller, and there was internal bickering, but
Part of it falls on him too. He's the manager.
Yeah, and who else are you going to – I get it. He's so well-respected. He's smart. Chapman loves this guy. But I do think that there's some warts that I don't think that, he shouldn't go – as this team continues to struggle and be underwhelming, then I think that it's okay to put the crosshairs not only on the players but also Bob Melvin as well.
No, I'm in agreement with you there, and I think the statement I hear on Bob Melvin a lot is he'll get you to the playoffs, but he won't get you through the playoffs. He's a good manager. He's not a great manager. He's basically like, when you're going home and you're saying, we want Bruce Bochy and we have Bruce Bochy at home. You get home, there's Bob Melvin. Like that's what I see Bob Melvin as. He's a good manager, not a great manager. And this year, though, these last 2 years, he's kind of had as good of a situation as he could possibly ask for. He's got a front office that's willing to back him. He's got players that are falling in behind him. He's got a great coaching staff alongside of him, helping him out. And still, though, it feels like there's another level that this team should be able to access, and it's just not happening yet. Now, in regards to, Bob Melvin getting the extension this week, it wasn't an extension, it was an option that was picked up this week. So he has an option for next year. He will be back now officially. And two things on that. One, it doesn't mean for certain that the Giants are 100% locked in with Bob Melvin in theory. But the other part of what it says is it shows that Buster Posey, again, comes down to Buster too, he will back up his words with actions. And if he's going to give his vote of confidence to Bob Melvin, which he did give to Susan Slusser earlier this week, and we were wondering, is that the dreaded vote of confidence that you give a guy right before he gets fired? It clearly wasn't. He backed that action up by, putting pen to paper and bringing Bob back for this next year. So he's not, again, the Giants could just move on, could still fire him, but for Buster to make a public declaration like that in the way that he did, I feel like at this point, this week, Buster Posey officially married himself to Bob Melvin, at least for next season, at least for the time being. Because coming into this year, Buster was not, Bob was not Buster's guy. Buster had a lot of respect for Bob, but, Farhan Zaidi hired Bob Melvin, not Buster Posey. And it's not uncommon for new executives to come in and want to hire their own guys. And I felt like this year is kind of like a show me year for Bob Melvin. And Buster Posey is asking Bob Melvin to show me why I should keep you on. And it's a very interesting way of showing, of Buster to show that, Bob, you proved me right. So,
yeah, it's a good point because I think that typically in sports, and certainly in Major League Baseball, that you want the GM or the president of baseball ops and the manager to be joined at the hip. Usually they'll go into things together. Like Lynch and Shanahan, you don't want to inherit something. You don't want to be lame duck. You want there to be familiarity. Those two have to be on the same page. And usually they'll have a history together, they'll have a friendship, and they know one another. And the working relationship is something that produces positive results. So you usually want to go in with your guy because more often than not, it doesn't work if you inherit somebody. I would say that it's a vote of confidence. I don't know if I would go as far as to say that he married himself to Bob Melvin because it's not like it's a 3 or 5 year extension. It's a 1 year option. They could clearly, if they go into the tank and if this team is really bad in September, listen, Buster Posey can eat the 1 year. It's a 1 year deal.
Yeah.
And Buster Posey can clearly go in a different direction. So I was surprised. I would have waited, but I can understand where Buster's coming from. And the one thing I do, and this sort of was crystallized when Buster Posey was in the press this past week, is that you're getting it from a guy who's been there. Like you're getting it from a guy who's been in the locker room. And when he speaks, it's like, this is what's best for team. How do I know? I've been there. I've been in those walls. I've been in the clubhouse. So this is the best thing in terms of the vote of confidence, what this team needs right now. But I don't think he's marrying himself because it's a 1 year, it's an option for a year. And if this team is really bad, I would not be surprised if Buster Posey was to revisit this.
Well, yeah, I agree there. And this is a team that is good enough to make the playoffs with this roster as is. And, I said, after the Rafael Devers trade that this kind of ups the pressure on Bob Melvin a little bit because now this roster looks much, much better with Devers in the lineup. When Chapman comes back, this lineup will look much, much better. And when you have the full complement there, which Bob Melvin will have now starting tonight, there's no excuse. Like, as Buster Posey said, it's time to go. So that's Dan Devone. I'm Sam Lubman. 888-957-9570 is the number. Bob Melvin got his option picked up this week. How are we feeling about that, Giants fans? Love to hear your thoughts on that. What do we do with Justin Verlander? What's the biggest issue for the Giants right now? We will take any and all Giants takes all morning long. That's what we do here on The Wrap. Shout out to everyone who's watching on YouTube. Brought to you by First NorCal Credit Union. For a low rate auto loan, apply online or just ask for First NorCal financing at the dealer. We got some fun stuff to talk about on the show this morning. And then Justice De Los Santos will be joining us at 11 o'clock. He covers the Giants for the Bay Area News Group. That will be courtesy of the River Islands guest line. Again, that is Dan Devone. I am Sam Lubman. More Giants talk coming up next on The Wrap. That is brought to you by Fremont Bank. Here for you, here for good.
I mean, bring it on, man.
That's the ball game. Well, the Giants come into Sacramento for a game that counts for the first time.
This is stupid.
Now back to the Orange and Black Weekend Wrap on 95.7 The Game.
Yeah, this was one of those games last night. It is the Orange and Black Weekend Wrap. Sam Blumman here with Dan Devone. We are coming to you live from the Laughing Monk Studios. Laughing Monk, righteously brewed, right here in San Francisco. Justice De Los Santos will be joining us on the River Islands guest line at 11 o'clock. And later on tonight, if looking for some hoops action, well, there's the California Classic that's happening right now at Chase Center. I believe the Warriors and Lakers are facing off today, but not the Warriors and Lakers that you know of. It's the young draft picks of the Warriors. We'll be facing off against the young draft picks of the Lakers. But if you're looking for some regular season hoops that has meaning, tonight at 5 o'clock, the Valkyries take on the Minnesota Lynx in Minnesota, and you can catch that game on the Valkyries channel on the Odyssey app. Just download the app and search Valkyries. Anyway,
There's more Valkyrie buzz in this town.
there is so much Valkyrie buzz in this town. I have not been able to procure a ticket yet. I've been trying to get to it. It is the hot ticket in town.
They
And
sell out, right?
every game is sold out. I hit up, we got our guy, R.C. Davis, the producer at the Warriors. He's kind of our go behind the scenes ticket guy. And I hit him up a few weeks ago, like, is there anything available? And he's like, even Valkyrie's team employees are not able to get tickets right now because this thing is just so sold out that there is literally no tickets available. So it is incredible how much of a hot ticket the Valkyrie games have become. Risotto and Zach, our crack staff in the back, they're covering these games all the time, so they get to have all sorts of fun at these games. It's a lit time, is it not? Let's see who responds first. We got to pot yourself up first there, Steven. It's hard to hear you when you don't pot your mic up. Well, he doesn't have his headphones in either, so he can't hear what I'm saying. Well, all right, we'll try again next time. I remember my
this
first
thing, man.
Hey,
There
by
you
the
go.
way, it's good to have Pasta and Zebo back in the hopper today.
Am I really back, though, if I can't even unmute myself?
Oh, well, you know what? Hey, I
Yes,
remember my first day in radio, too. It's all good. Yeah, Zach, you
Wait,
go
that's the drop of the day. Am I what? Give that to me again. Am I really back if I can't?
if I can't even unmute myself?
Thank you. That's going on the gravestone, my man.
Zach, you get to those Valkyries games. How much fun are those? He's not even turning the mic on. Do we just not turn our mics?
Zebo and Pasta,
Yeah, we're
ladies
just
and
0
gentlemen.
for 2 on getting our mics on back there. I try to throw you guys a bone, you throw it right back at me. So, all right, well, it would have been nice to know what the Valkyrie games are like, but that's just not going to happen today. So I guess we'll just talk about the Giants, I guess. Giants 11-2 losers. There we go. Unfortunately, the window was officially shut, unfortunately. We'll try next time, Zach. 11-2 is the final last night. A's absolutely waxed the Giants. A's get their first win over the Giants this year. And I don't know if there's a trophy that is being played for this year between the Giants and the A's. There's the Bridge Trophy that Brody Brazil started up a few years ago that was famously made with a piece of the Bay Bridge. Were you for or against the Bridge
No,
Trophy?
that thing was silly.
I liked it, actually.
Yeah, I couldn't get it.
It was like the Cal Stanford axe. I love having a physical thing to play for.
Well, but the axe goes back over 150 years. Something that
the
Brody
tradition had to
Brazil
start.
decided-
The tradition had to start somewhere. If the A's and Giants were still in the Bay Area for another 150 years, that Bridge Trophy would, I'm sure, have lots of history and legacy behind it. Unfortunately, we only got, I think, 6 years?
Okay, so my opinion is of the early years, and I don't like it.
Yeah.
Get back to me on 150, and it might have some value.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if we even still pass it around. I mean, what, do we just take a chunk of concrete from Highway 80 and use that now? We call it the UC Davis Trophy.
By the way, I would like to, at some point, in all seriousness, talk about that park. That's ridiculous. That's Sutter Health Park.
if you want to talk about that park right now, we can talk about that park right now.
That's an embarrassment to baseball.
Mm-hmm.
In all seriousness, that they cannot, and I don't care what's going on with Fisher and the Bozos with the Oakland A's. If I'm Manfred, there's an edict like you have to procure a Major League Baseball stadium if you want to play in this league. I don't care of your situation. You fix it out. You fix it in Oakland or Vegas or go play with the A's or the Dodgers. If you want to be a vagabond, you cannot play in that ballpark. That is not MLB standard. And as the commissioner, that's not up to snuff to the product that I put out on a daily basis.
And the great, what's even funnier about all this, or more embarrassing about all this, is you could say everything you just said, Dan, times 2, because the Rays are also playing in a minor league ballpark this year.
The Yankees summer facility.
Yeah, 2 separate major league teams are playing in minor league ballparks, and people will literally look you dead in the eye and say that Rob Manfred's actually been good for baseball. It is absolutely, this season alone and everything, just everything with this horrifically farcical movement of the A's to Las Vegas, with Rob Manfred and John Fisher flaking on the city, and Dave Conman Cavill and all what he did to completely just dupe the A's and their fan base into thinking, or the A's fan base into thinking that he was a guy who was actually going to work with the fans to try and make that ballpark. I remember Cavill, he had those office hours when he first arrived. Hey, A's fans, come and tell me what you want. We'll make it happen. That is just, when you do stuff like that and then pull the rug out under a fan base like him and Fisher did, like, that is ultimate sports scumbag stuff right there. And putting them in Sutter Health Park, we have lawn seating at Major League Baseball games. Like, that's just how ridiculous this is. This is real Major League Baseball games, and those games are supposed to mean something. Like, Major League Baseball, there is a pageantry to game days. There is a feel, there is an atmosphere that the game is supposed to have. And there's almost like a magic to it. You know, we were talking about magic earlier because Steven Risotto was talking about how much he hates Disneyland. And, you know, that's kind of like how Rob Manfred feels about baseball. It's the same way that Steven Risotto feels about Disneyland right now. Just completely sick and tired of it. I'm just teasing, of course. Risotto spent 3 days in Disneyland, and I guess 2 days is...
2 days is more than enough.
There you go, yeah. But, yeah, Rob Manfred, the problem with Manfred is just he looks at the game as the only thing that matters is the bottom line. You know, the finances, the corporate level of it. And that is what you've seen this game become over the last few years, is a very sterile product meant to boost corporate gains. And as a result, you have a game that is devoid of emotion, devoid of any charm or magic, and you have a commissioner who has no issue sticking 2 teams in minor league ballparks for an entire season and thinking that it's okay. It is an insult to the game of baseball that this is transpiring.
You know, it's almost like if you want to host a Super Bowl, you'll put in a bid. And I'm taking the extreme here as an example. But the committee, well, the NFL will, first of all, look at, you have to have a certain seating capacity of somewhere upwards to 65 to 70,000. What's it like in terms of hotels? Is there, is there public transport? Much like that of the Olympics. Now, you don't have to get to that level. But if you're going to be a Major League Baseball team and play in our league, there are certain standards that you have to meet. And you cannot play in a Mickey Mouse ballpark that has a capacity of 13,000 people.
And they're still not even selling it out.
And there was 12,000 last night, and it seats 13,500 or something. That's silly.
That's because Giants fans showed up.
And the way the ball, not to mention playing in that place, I don't blame Luis Severino. Because, and I know people get on, I'm like, well, dude, you signed the contract. It's not as though you were under contract and they moved and you have, no, if you play for the Oakland A's and you're a player that's upset having to play in that ballpark, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. I'll get behind you 7 days out of the week. And more often than not, baseball players sometimes can be wrong and greedy. But in this instance, listen, if you don't want to pitch in that park, Luis, I understand where you're coming from. Dude, you're a major leaguer. You play with the Yankees and the Mets, and now you're in this hellhole? I hear you. Your team should boycott and just say, you know what? We're not getting out of the damn bus today. Get us out of here. Have you seen their home record? Only the Rockies have a worse home record than that of the Oakland A's.
No, and I think Severino, again, he's 2-9 with a 5.09 ERA on the season. He is 0-7 with a 6.79 ERA and 57 innings pitched at Sutter Health Park this year. Hitters are hitting 300 off of him there. And he has been very open about how much he disdains pitching at Sutter Health Park. He has been very clear about just the way it's all set up, because you got the clubhouses out in the outfield. Usually, pitchers like to go down the tunnel behind the dugout into the clubhouse that way because that's how you access the clubhouse.
It's like old candlestick.
Yeah, it's behind the dugout. But here he can't do that. He has to sit in the dugout the entire game, which, again, I know, he has to sit in the dugout the entire game. How awful. But baseball players are creatures of habit. They have routines that they do every day. Those routines are what allow them to go out and play baseball well. They need that. That's just how you think about everyone in your everyday life. I mean, Dan, you have your morning routine. I have my morning routine. I have my evening routine. Like, we all have routines in our day that we go about. And I just want, everyone out there driving around, think about what your routine is. Think about what your daily routine is. And think how annoyed you get when something small or stupid interrupts your own personal daily routine. Now, imagine that your routine is being ruined and you're making millions of dollars playing a high-stakes game at the highest level. Like, it ramps up. It adds up. It becomes a serious issue that these guys have to deal with. And it just shows a complete lack of understanding from the powers that be in Major League Baseball that they think this would be okay. If they truly understood this game, they truly understood its players, they would not be forcing them into this comical situation when you have a perfectly good facility. Well, I don't know about perfectly good, but you have a usable facility in the Coliseum in Oakland. The reason you're not doing it, though, is you're just being petty. You want to be petty with the city of Oakland, and you don't want to do things the simple way. So you do this whole little cockamamie farce thing, and you put on a smiling face and say, oh, no, it's great. It's going to work out. And everyone can see just how much of a sham this really is.
So you have not been to Candlestick Park to see a Giants game. Is that correct?
Unfortunately, the only time I made it to Candlestick was to see a couple Niner games. I was not old enough. I did not get to a Candlestick game.
So it sort of reminds me, the visiting team did not have a clubhouse that you could access via the locker room at the Stick.
Oh, really?
So after the game, it was brutal. Like, they would have to walk down the right field line and go out through the right field gate to access their locker room or their clubhouse. It was one of the many, many things that was wrong with Candlestick, but it still has a very soft place in my heart. Where's the crazy crowd when you need him? But here's the thing about Sacramento, is that ever since I've been alive, they, along with San Jose, have been vying for a major league franchise. Like, Sacramento has some passionate fans, or so I thought, but they always wanted. They were bidding for the A's way back in the day, as well as the Giants, when there were issues with ownership. This is embarrassment. This is a poor reflection on the city of Sacramento. When you're playing games in West Sacramento, and these games are getting televised regionally, and people are watching this going, this is Sacramento. This is a Mickey Mouse town and a ballpark and a city that's not equipped to handle Major League Baseball. And that may not be the case, but that's what's being, that's the feeling that I think is sort of being the sentiment that is pervasive right now when you see baseball games being played and or televised from that Sutter Health Park is an embarrassment, not only to the city of Sacramento, but to all of baseball. And it gets back to how the hell you can allow a team and your product to put that out there is beyond me.
I mean, this is the same guy who once called the World Series trophy a piece of metal because it was easier to do that rather than hold the Houston Astros accountable for cheating in the World Series. I mean, that's just how this guy views the game.
I almost feel like there should be an asterisk next to a loss if you played and you lost in Sacramento. There should be an asterisk that, it was in Sacramento.
Like, sorry, you lost this game, but you also had to deal with Rob Manfred nonsense. So it's like, if we have the Manfred runner, we could have the Manfred asterisk that we could put on the losses there. But, I'm going to defend the city of Sacramento a little bit because this is a city, as you said, they want Major League sports. They rally behind the Sacramento Kings to keep the Kings there when it looked like the Kings were going to be heading up to the Pacific Northwest or somewhere up there. And, we could make a joke how, I'm sure they regret that now. No. Kings fans want their Kings in Sacramento. That fan base rallied around that team. They have shown that that city has shown that they will rally around Major League sports, and they want baseball badly, and they've had minor league baseball. And the city of Sacramento absolutely wanted to use these 3 years to showcase that they can hold a major league team, whether it be the A's when John Fisher inevitably fumbles this Vegas project, which, by the way, you want to talk about all-time shams of groundbreaking. The one that they had last week down in Las Vegas, where they had a little sandbox there and they forced Chris Townsend to shove a shovel into the dirt to symbolize the groundbreaking. It's like, We all know y'all ain't breaking ground on anything down there. Stop it. But thank you for that buzzer. But the city of Sacramento really wanted to use this as an opportunity to show that when this all falls apart, that they could take the A's in. And honestly, I don't hate the idea of the A's in Sacramento. I feel like that could be that's a market that would absolutely embrace the A's, and they would have their own place to kind of run around. They'd have their own room for activities. They wouldn't have to share the Bay Area with the Giants anymore. But the A's in Major League Baseball are in no way, shape, or form allowing Sacramento to try and showcase itself as a major league city. They're calling themselves the Athletics, not the Sacramento Athletics. It's the ATH in the scorebook, not the SAC. They're forcing them to wear Athletics on the jerseys. There will be no Sacramento on those jerseys. The only form of Sacramento branding you can get at Sutter Health Park is the little patch that they wear on their sleeve, which also comes with a Viva Las Vegas patch or something like that. So it's like the only reference to Sacramento comes with the caveat of, but also Las Vegas. So Sacramento's kind of getting a raw deal the same way that these players are getting a raw deal as well and having to deal with the nonsense up there.
Yeah, I don't blame Sacramento and the fan base. This is just a poor reflection on them. I don't care how it is
made to look poor on them, yeah.
Yeah, so they're the losers in this because when you watch a game from Sacramento, you're like, what? What is this? You're not equipped to handle a major league franchise. And this is just a bad look for everybody. It's a bad reflection on the city of Sacramento. And again, if you're Manfred and this is Major League Baseball, for crying out loud, this cannot be a professional ballpark. And you cannot allow baseball, if at the beginning of the season, the minute you toiled around and looked at this stadium and they proposed playing it for 3 years, if you're Manfred, you're like, no, this is not up to snuff. We have a standard we have to live by, for crying out loud.
What this is, you're absolutely right. What this is, though, is one man's beef with the city. Now, of course, Sheng Tao and her administration did, I think, the A's and this fan base no favors in terms of how they handled things. She was good at standing up and playing the part and saying the lines. You know, she came on the morning roast famously, and she called John Fisher out for the BS that he's doing. She didn't say BS. She said the full-on thing. First mayor to get dumped on 95.7 The Game airways. But, you know, she said all the right things. I don't know if it's a name drop, but then what happened? She gets pinched for fraud and ends up getting recalled, and that whole thing falls apart. And, you know, I found out, you know, the streets were talking, and the actual work being done behind the scenes to keep the A's in Oakland by Sheng Tao's staff was not what was being presented publicly. I'll just say that. I don't think there was as much of a drive by city leadership to keep the A's in Oakland, and I don't think that's because they did want to keep the A's in Oakland. I think it was, unfortunately, a mayoral administration that was just in over its head and falling apart. And now you got a situation where the city of Oakland and Major League Baseball, the relationship is just so gross right now that, you know, Barbara Lee, she's the new mayor of Oakland now. I don't know if there's any, I mean, like, obviously she said the standard line of we're open to working with Major League Baseball, blah, blah, blah. But it feels like there's no impetus on either side to work with the other side at this point to try and salvage this and make it work for the next couple of years, because Sutter Health Park is just, it's just not feasible. It's just not. They cannot make the A's play 2 more years in this ballpark. With the Rays, that's a little bit more understandable because, you know, Mother Nature comes through and she does what she wants to do. She rips apart the trop and creates a situation out of nowhere. This is a situation that everybody saw coming from 10,000 miles away, and it was still allowed to have happen.
Just to bring this back home to the Giants and their inability to hit, because when I watch the ball carry out there, I'm like, this is silly. I don't know if it's the wind coming off the delta, whatever the hell it is. It's just, it is so junior. And I listen, a lot of teams tee off there, but all the more reason why it makes no sense that the Giants were held to 2 runs and almost, I mean, basically, you know, again, like if you can't hit there, what the hell's going on?
Well, the Giants, this just Giants offense, they'll make any ballpark look big at the end of the day. And again, it's one night. Hopefully it doesn't carry into tonight. JP Sears, I guess I hate saying this, but you got to tip your cap to him. He had a great night last night.
Isn't that the guy Flores teed off on with the 3 home runs? Were all 3 off of Sears?
No, not all three. I don't.
Two of them were.
I think it was 3 different pitchers that night. I'll have to go back and look that up, or maybe our guys in the back could pull up that Friday night A's game at Oracle Park and remind us who the pitchers were. But while we're doing that, though, the phone number to call or text is 888-957-9570. We're going to go out to the lines. We've got one of our favorites here. Let's go out to New Jersey, talk to our guy Mitch out in New Jersey. Mitch, what's worse, the Giants' offense or the fact that the A's have to play in Sacramento?
It's close. I say Sacramento. They could force him to sell the team because he's a terrible owner. He doesn't want to keep the talent. They should have forced their way to San Jose, but two things. I don't understand why they can't have Sacramento. They're playing Sacramento. You play right underneath the governors, right, and all the political big shots, all the money in California. You can't force them to build a better stadium. Or how about the minor league team? They should have just coexisted with the Giants until they get the stadium if it gets ready in Las Vegas. Because originally I wanted to see him play in Utah. I didn't play in Utah or Portland.
Portland, yeah, I can see Portland working out.
What about San Jose? As Giants territory? Come on, this is it's a free country, right? We got to cut down the territory. Giants are making plenty of money. Just have to get more offense for the season to save the season. Yeah. Anyway, you have a happy 4th, and you have a nice weekend.
Awesome. Thanks for calling in, Mitch. Glad to hear from you there. And yeah, playing Sacramento worse than the Giants' offense. That just shows how bad playing in Sacramento is for this team. But again, yeah, it seems like with the Giants, it's bringing it all back there. It's the same conversation every week. How do they get the bats going? But is there a salvation on the way in the form of one Matt Chapman? Bob Melvin has said that when Chapman comes back, we'll see a more structured lineup. We were kind of talking about what we want that lineup to look like last week. Be interesting to see what the lineup looks like tonight. But I believe this is actually going to be this might be the first time we're going to have Chapman and Devers in the lineup together. So be interesting to see what that looks like as well tonight. So it's all there's potential for this offense to get back on track. I'm not going to say they're going to become Murderers Row or anything like that, but can they at least be the team that at the beginning of the year was moving the line along, showed great situational hitting, was going the other way? Can you just get back to doing the basic stuff that this team was doing back in April?
Just hit a little bit with this pitching and this bullpen. And I think Chapman is really, really going to help. And now you suddenly look at the left side of the diamond and you're like, okay, this feels good. With Adames and Chapman, Casey Schmidt, if he moves over to second base, Devers, if he picks up a first baseman's glove, suddenly call me crazy, but I begin to think that this offense is no longer the big concern. But again, I think that you really have to target the pitching staff. If Verlander is not somebody you can rely on, and at this point, Verlander's got to be going, what the hell why did I go to San Francisco in search of 300? The guy's still looking for his first win. And he hasn't had a lot of run support, but he also hasn't been very good. But now we can't leave out Hayden Birdsong. I don't know what the hell's going on there, but that now becomes a situation. And so, listen, if you have 2 horses at the front of your staff, the silver lining this week was Robbie Ray. We do at some point. We can't dog the Giants for the next hour and a half, 2 hours. We at some point we have to address Robbie Ray the complete game, because now if you go Ray and you go Logan Webb, that actually in today's baseball can get you by and win you a series. But there is a concern with Roop looks good, but Birdsong, and now with what's going on with Verlander, at this point, when you're talking about improvements for the Giants, you're going to have to get someone off the ticker that I think is a veteran pitcher.
Yeah, that's 40% of your starting rotation is a big question mark right now. And as much as I like Landon Roop, even I have to admit he is still a young starter, and there's going to be a wall that he will probably hit at some point. So it's a lot of work for Bob Melvin and this coaching staff to figure out, but they did just get the big vote of confidence this week. So how much of it is on Bob Melvin now to right this ship? How much of it is it on the players to kind of pull themselves together and right this ship themselves? Want to hear from you guys. 888-957-9570 is the number. We'll take more of your calls on their side. And yeah, what's the pressure like now on Bob Melvin now that his options picked up, and what do we need to see from him the rest of this season for the Giants to actually follow through with picking up that option? So that and more on the other side, brought to you by Fremont Bank, here for you, here for good.
Do you want to be on top?
under his glove.
Now back to the Orange and Black Weekend Wrap. The best Giants talk in the Bay on 95.7 The Game.
That was a Brett Wisely of rejoins right there.
Wisely under his glove.
All right. Yeah, there we go. It did go under his glove. That was the error that he made last night. Dwayne Kuiper on the call. You're right, Dan. Brett Wisely did have a home run. He broke up the shutout in the 8th inning, pinch hitting for Willard Dibs after Bob Melvin waved the white flag. Brett Wisely, you had basically like in football, when the score gets so gross that you bring in the backups to rest the starters, and Brett Wisely, Andrew Kisner, Dominic Smith, they all came in late to rest Adames, Devers, and Flores as the Giants fall 11-2 on the 4th of July at the state capitol. Everyone was launching fireworks last night except for the Giants offense. That's how it was. How was your 4th, by the way, Dan?
It was, I think I mentioned this to you, I was out in Sausalito with a little sort of a neighborhoody crowd out there. Do you spend any time in Sausalito? It's a little funky sort of community they got going out there.
I haven't gotten up in there recently, no.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about, if you were into meditation, Zen meditation, then you would have been very popular last night. But, it was cool. It was a good crowd. I have a buddy out there that has a nice house overlooking. I mentioned this to you earlier that this was one of the few times, because I grew up in San Francisco, and every year they have the fireworks at Christie Field. And my entire life, I don't think I've ever seen one firework because it's foggy, right?
Yeah.
Last night, apparently, for the first time in decades, it was a clear night without a cloud in the sky.
Oh, really?
And Christie Fields went off without a hitch.
Oh, wow. Nice. Well, shout out to everyone who went there. I live in Oakland, and you don't need to go anywhere to find fireworks in Oakland. I just went up on the roof of my building, and they were popping off all over the place. It was almost like the neighborhoods were like trying to compete with each other, like which sector of the neighborhood could have better fireworks. Because
I thought this was a gunshot violence sort of analogy, but go ahead.
Oh no,
this was too.
No, this was actual fireworks. No, it was not like that at all. Because all the fireworks were coming from the same spots, so it was just like I'm watching them just go so late into the night. Well, first off, if you're shooting off fireworks and the sun's still out, what are you doing? Like, that's just a waste of a firework. You can't even see it. Like, you're just wanting stuff to explode at that point. But yeah, once the sun went down from like 8:30 to, I think there was like at like 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and it was, pop, 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 pop. Like, just like that, basically. So yeah, they went pretty late in the night last night. And my thought was just like, how do you just not run out? Like, how many of these fireworks do you have where you're constantly launching them off for 4 hours straight with very little break? Very different fireworks, too, like big time business fireworks making all sorts of colors and noises for 4 hours straight. I don't know how you're able to afford all those. Like, that's a lot of fireworks.
I'm sort of conflicted with fireworks and 4th of July. I've always enjoyed it, but now that I get older, like, I don't want to take that away from the younger people. Fireworks are always sort of a big deal, but I'm a dog person. I think you got a dog, like, that is the worst day of the year for dogs. Like, they just have no idea what to do, and they're miserable, and they just shake, uncontrollably for hours. I remember when I was a child, our dog ran away. It's just like, I think about that more than anything else on 4th of July, which just tells you where I'm at these days.
No, I'm right there with you. Our dog was, parked in the closet hiding all night long. And it's just one of those, like, you try to keep them as comfortable as possible and hope that they can ride through it, or, give a little something to help them sleep a little bit better to get through the night. But yeah, that was, it's not a fun night for dogs, and it was not a fun night for the Giants either. And this was a very interesting week for the Giants, Dan, as they are in the midst of a just brutal offensive slide right now over the last few weeks. And in the midst of all these struggles, there's been a lot of fan frustration with the coaching staff, a lot of fan frustration with Bob Melvin. There's been a lot of calls for coaches to be, removed or replaced. And Buster Posey gave a vote of confidence to the coaching staff via Susan Slusser in the San Francisco Chronicle earlier this week. And my first thought was, is that the dreaded vote of confidence that you'll see other teams give to a coach who's about to get fired? And it was not, because the next day it was announced that the Giants were picking up the option for Bob Melvin's contract next year, which gives Bob a level of security to know that he could very well be back next year. And Buster Posey spoke to the media afterwards. We only have the quotes. We don't have the sound. But he said, and this is pulled from the Twitter handle, the Twitter feed of one Shayna Rubin, sometimes when you're going through a rough patch, this is what Buster had to say, there's a tendency to want to point the finger at the coaches. And if anybody deserves any blame from the top, it should be on me. It shouldn't be on our manager or coaching staff. I'm the one who sets the roster. So I felt like, with all those things considered, this was a good time for me to show my belief in Bob and his coaching staff. So a lot to take away from there. What do you think about Buster showing Bob Melvin that confidence? Do you share that confidence? And then there's the third layer of, what do we feel about Buster Posey saying the blame should be on him? So a lot we could take here, Dan. I want to hear from callers too. 888-957-9570 is the number. YouTube chat, I want to hear from you guys as well. Shout out to you guys who are watching on YouTube. Brought to you by First NorCal Credit Union for a low-rate auto loan. Apply online or just ask for First NorCal financing at the dealer. So let's just dive right into it. Do we agree with the timing? Do we agree with the reasoning to pick up Bob Melvin's option?
I don't agree with it, but I can respect it. And I think what Buster Posey is telling everybody is that I'm not going to overreact. Like, this is not the time to be firing anybody, that this is an opportunity for me to sort of squash things and give him a vote of confidence. And again, this is coming from somebody who has been there before. Like, all of us, we're on the outside looking in. As much as we think we know about baseball, none of us have stepped between the lines and know what it's like in terms of the climate in that clubhouse. And that's where things always begin and end with me when you're assessing a coach in the NFL, a manager in Major League Baseball. And I think I mentioned this to you before. It's not so much of his coaching decisions. And I had talked about, like, I think that the mistakes that you're seeing in the base running, to me, ultimately falls squarely on the shoulders of Bob Melvin. But that aside, whether a team has a good manager or not, it's usually whether the players want to play for that guy, whether they respect him, whether he still has the locker room, and whether there's, the minute that cancer creeps in or guys begin to chirp and there's divisiveness, it's time to go, especially if your team is losing. And by all accounts, Chapman says, hey, listen, one of the reasons I resigned because I want to play for Bob Melvin. Logan Webb is the same way. He's like, listen, man, I want this guy as my manager. So, again, I have no idea the relationship between Bob Melvin and the players, but that's really where this all begins and ends when you're assessing whether or not he's a good manager going forward.
Yeah, and I do believe he has the respect of his players. I believe he has the support of his players, and at minimum, he does have the two most important guys in that clubhouse in his corner, in Matt Chapman and in Logan Webb. And so, yeah, I get, and I think, and we had Dave Fleming on earlier this week, he kind of talked about this as well. It's, the coaches, they could hear the noise. They know it's happening. They try to put the blinders on, but they hear the noise and the frustration that's going on, and the players know what's going on. And I think, you don't want this situation where doubt is starting to creep in to the clubhouse based on what is being said outside. No, I'm not saying that's what was happening, but a great way to prevent that from happening is to double down and just let everyone know, hey, no one's going anywhere. Like, we're committing to this group right here. And I think there is something to be said about the way Buster Posey is choosing right now to let everybody know, hey, we're sticking with you guys. And it did lead to a couple wins this week over the Diamondbacks. And it seems like every time Buster has spoken, the team has kind of woken up a little bit. You go back to, again, the "it's time to go" statement, and that led to a 7-game winning streak. And then right after that, he brings in Rafael Devers. So he used his words to pick the team up, and then he used his actions to pick the team up. And that's what he did again this week. And I do respect Buster for doing that. But as far as, what does this mean for Bob Melvin? What does this mean for your expectations of Bob Melvin? I mean, a couple weeks ago, we were having a conversation of how much do you blame the coaches for the struggles versus the players. And it's going to sound, like maybe we're doing two sides of the same coin here, but I have a harder time, like the hitting struggles of this team, I have a harder time putting those on Pat Burrell than I do the hitters. Like, I feel like that's more on the hitters. But when I see a lineup being trotted out there that's basically just you're trying to chase the hot guy and see what can happen, and that's why Mike Yastrzemski was in the cleanup spot, when we're just jamming Christian Koss into the leadoff spot because let's see what happens. When I see the lack of lineup consistency that we've had from Bob Melvin with Matt Chapman out, there's some frustrations there because it's just like I feel like it shouldn't be this complicated to get a lineup out there even with just one guy missing. That's a Bob Melvin thing. When it's the same kind of miscues on the bases, it's just like you need to be setting the tone of those things being taken care of. That's a Bob Melvin thing. So those are kind of the things I look at in terms of just like if you're going to be frustrated with Bob Melvin, it's in those areas right there because those are areas where I feel like it is incumbent on him to set a tone that pushes the team away from those mistakes into playing better baseball.
I have an issue with the lineup and when guys show up to the park and they have no idea where they're going to be hitting that day. I like structure. I'll give you Jung Hoo Lee as a perfect example. That's a leadoff hitter. He's a leadoff hitter.
A three-hitter at the lowest, but a leadoff hitter.
But if you put him in a situation, I've seen him come to the plate where the third baseman is playing back, and part of that is because he can't go the other way. But that's a bunt. That's a base hit that they're going to give you. And as a leadoff hitter, you should take that to set the table. But more often than not, he's coming up in situations where he's got to drive in runners. Like he's coming in like a guy who's hitting in the 4-hole. And that's not Jung Hoo Lee. Jung Hoo Lee should not be your home run RBI guy. But because of the juggling of this starting lineup and where you're hitting from day to day, he finds himself, and I just use him as an example because, and I know Kyle Schwarber's a leadoff hitter these days, just to give you an example that the sort of prototypical, leadoff hitter has gone by the wayside. The Vince Colemans of the world and the Ichiros no longer live here anymore. But I do believe that there are table setters like that of a Jung Hoo Lee who can start a rally by getting on base and by putting pressure immediately on the defense with your speed and go from first to third and potentially go from first to home. And that's where he's best utilized. But if you're moving him around and he's coming up and now he feels as though I've got to drive in runs as opposed to just getting on base, that's a completely different mindset.
No, I agree. I agree with that because I do believe you have a point there. I think putting him lower in the lineup has changed his swing a little bit. This is a guy who should not be trying to get under the ball, Jung Hoo Lee. And why that we continually see him try to do that is beyond me. He had in the game on Thursday night, on Wednesday night, he had a triple in the first inning that he kind of got under a little bit. But he had a double in the third inning that I thought perfectly encapsulated just kind of what you want to see from Jung Hoo Lee at the plate. And that is a guy who's going to have a level swing, who's not going to lean over and try and lunge at these pitches and just drive the ball. That's what he was doing at the beginning of the year, and he was hitting all sides of the field on it. But then for whatever reason, it's probably coincides with him getting dropped in the lineup. You saw the launch angle go up, and you saw the production go down. Jung Hoo Lee is not a guy who should be trying to drive the ball like that. Like, Dan, I think it's no coincidence, and I brought this up the other day. The Giants started 19-10 this season, and Jung Hoo Lee, when he was driving the ball, was hitting .324 during that time. And I'm not saying that Jung Hoo Lee was absolutely responsible for the Giants' hot start, but I'm saying that the Giants were a better team when Jung Hoo Lee was hitting like a guy who drives the ball, not a guy who tries to power the ball. Over the last couple months, he's tried to be the power guy. He's hitting 195 in that time, and the Giants are 27-32 over that stretch, which is 28-32, which obviously not very good. Now again, I'm not saying that Jung Hoo Lee is the difference between a good Giants team and a bad Giants team, but when Jung Hoo Lee is hitting like he's expected to, it makes the rest of the lineup go. And you see the effects from there. That's why this team was so great at the start of the year, where you had, Ramos locked in at the 1, Adames at the 2, even Jung Hoo Lee in the 3 spot. It worked. Chapman at the 4, Flores 5, so on throughout the rest of the lineup. You had a set, consistent lineup that was producing. And right around, May is when we started moving guys around. We dropped Adames in the lineup. We dropped Lee in the lineup. All of a sudden, guys start not hitting as well. Now, is it as simple to say that Bob Melvin moving guys down the lineup ruin their swings and ruin them at the plate? I think that's a little too simplistic. I think it's, there's a level of ebbs and flows in this game too that play a part as well in those situations. But when it all happens kind of at once, it's easy to look at the lineup movement and say, well, that's the reason right there. It's not just that, but I do think it is a main part of the offensive struggles that we've been seeing. And again, this all comes back to who's right in the lineup. We know it's Bob Melvin because the Giants made it abundantly clear this offseason the lineup is Bob's. At the end of the day, the lineup is trotted out there. He has the final say in it. So, yeah, this puts all of the responsibility, I think, or not all of it, but a big chunk of the responsibility onto Bob Melvin.
And Jung Hoo Lee, I say this every week, has just become a dead pull hitter.
Mm-hmm.
And
he was at that at the beginning of the year.
And you like to see him get back to that. The one thing that scares me about Jung Hoo Lee, if this continues, and it's still very early, but a lot of the players that the Giants have locked up to long-term deals, because these guys aren't going anywhere, are not playing well. And so it's not as though you can get out from underneath these things if they continue to go poorly, but you're looking at, Devers is going to be around for a long time, and he's owed $250 million. Same thing with Adames for the next 7 years, and the same thing when you're talking about Jung Hoo Lee. So there's some longevity there for some players who are struggling with the San Francisco Giants. And right now it's not a matter of concern, but if we continue to trend in this direction, you got a ball and chain that are sort of tied to you for a while.
Yeah, I mean, there's already a lot of people who are having concerns about the Jung Hoo Lee contract and how much of an albatross that could be. I mean, we were talking last week, if he didn't have that contract, he'd probably be heading to Sacramento to work on his swing. We did have Dave Fleming on the Morning Roast on Thursday, and I asked him, what the difference between what he's seeing from Jung Hoo Lee now versus April is, and here's what Dave Fleming had to say about Jung Hoo Lee.
He is getting pitched differently. I do think it's been pretty obvious that the last month he is seeing just a relentless array of pitches away. Teams are just staying away, and he hasn't made that adjustment yet where he's beating them to left field or center field. And we saw a little bit of that in April, but I do think he's going to have to work on that, whether he gets a little closer to the plate or a little less wide open with his stance, changes his bat path just slightly because, we've seen a lot of pop-ups and fly balls to left field, and that's not his game.
Exactly, and I think it's incumbent on the coaching staff, but this is where the battle between coach versus player, I think, starts to take over. The hitting coaches can tell Jung Hoo Lee that you need to change where you are on the plate. You need to not swing at these certain pitches. You need to make this adjustment. You need to do that adjustment. But then it becomes on Jung Hoo Lee to actually go through with making that adjustment. And what you're seeing this year is a Giants lineup that just seems so dead set in their ways that I think it's impeding their ability to make these adjustments. And there I have a hard time really kind of putting it on the coaching staff. Now, I'm kind of curious what Giants fans want to be seeing from Bob Melvin that's different right now. Because I know the other night, the Christian Koss not home run that was ruled a double after it was ruled an out after the review upheld it and said no, it was a double because what's his name, the Arizona Diamondbacks fan, for the 5th time in 4 years, reached over the wall and interfered with the ball in play. Yeah, for the rest of the year. Yeah. I know a lot of Giants fans want to see Bob Melvin come out and get rung and get thrown out there, especially if, Koss was ruled out. And Bob, he was mild-mannered about it. He got ejected right before the 9th inning instead, and then not a super exciting ejection. But sometimes an ejection, it can fire a team up. It can just let fans know that there's a fire in that dugout, that they're trying to get things going. And that's not really what the kind of guy Bob Melvin is. He's not a openly demonstrative person. There's kind of a quiet intimidation about him that doesn't really translate on camera if you're a person who likes to see a very animated manager. But Dave Fleming had something to say the other day that I thought was very interesting. Take a listen to this about how Bob Melvin will challenge and call out his players.
Yeah, I think he's been pretty feisty, and I think he might see a little more of that here going forward, of him challenging some players. That's almost never going to be public because that's just not the way that he does it. But in the last couple of days, there have been a couple of guys that he has privately challenged. And I think, maybe we're starting to see some of the response of that in some individual performances. You can't do that too much. You got to save those moments. But I think that I know that he's definitely willing to do that kind of stuff.
So I think there's probably a level of fans want to see this stuff done publicly, but that's just not how things are done. But it is being done just behind the scenes, which if you don't see it, I can understand as a fan why that would make you frustrated, though.
Well, it's hard to get publicly run from a baseball game as a manager these days because of the reviews, right? Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
If I'm an umpire, I would just say, well, dude, take it up with New York. What are you?
Well, now what happens if you get a review that you don't like? As soon as you come out to argue, you get tossed because it's just like you can't argue with the review afterwards. So yeah, ejections, a part of replay is you see less ejections, but as Aaron Boone will show us, that shouldn't really stop you.
He's on thin ice out. Yankees and Mets, what the hell happened to them? But just get back to hitting coaches. Listen, today's hitting coach will give you advice, but today's players, it's not as though I'm going to alter my swing and change dramatically what it is that has brought me to this level where I'm a Major League Baseball player. And the reason why is because there's too much money involved. As a guy who has a personal contract, if I'm Jung Hoo Lee and I'm making this much money, I know what it is that I do. And I've been in slumps before, whether it be in Korea or here. And so I think that people have to understand the relationship between the two. Oh, it must be Pat Burrell's fault because this guy can't hit. There's not a player alive with the money that's being exchanged right now, especially from your best hitters in the lineup, that is going to say, oh, I'm just going to follow you to the promised land. What you say is gospel. And then suddenly go into a slump, find yourself out of baseball and going, doggone it, I should have never listened to Pat Burrell. It's not the way it works. This is very personal with these guys. I mentioned this before. They have video. They have hitting gurus. They know exactly
they have their own swing coaches
that they need to do. I'm just going to throw this out there just to see if I can definitely poking the bear here. But if Jung Hoo Lee continues to go down this path and he's struggling, I have a friend who's from Pittsburgh. Doesn't live there anymore.
Pennsylvania or California?
No, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
He's very, very Pittsburgh. He doesn't live there. He always claims Mark Cuban's from Pittsburgh. Anyways, but he stays on top of Pirate baseball, and so I love to, bend his ear from time to time. And nobody in Pittsburgh right now, well, not nobody, but there is this groundswell of O'Neill Cruz hate. Getting to your point about Elliot Ramos, I don't know if you saw that play. It might have been last week where O'Neill Cruz.
It got by. I mean, he didn't really go after
There's
it.
a lot of that, and it's beginning to build. And so the Pirates have quietly said, listen, don't even ask us about Skeens. He's not going anywhere, as well as McCutchen. They went out of their way to say McCutchen and Skeens, but nobody's talking about O'Neill Cruz, that young center fielder, that there is some subtle talk that potentially he could be a guy because of the sort of lackadaisical play that is it's getting to the point where the fan base as well as management is sort of like the Rafi Devers, right? Like all this stuff behind the scenes that when a guy like Devers is traded, everybody's like, what the hell? I didn't see that coming. That they're potentially, and again, I'm starting something that probably isn't there, but O'Neill Cruz might be a guy that could get moved at the trade deadline. Most likely not.
I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, he does have, again, he's 2 years in. He's got 3 arbitration years to come before he hits restricted free agency. So, yeah, that's it. And now, would the Giants be in on an O'Neill Cruz? I think they have bigger issues they need to deal with. I think you need to fix the pitching first before you take care of the hitting. Ironically enough, again, with Matt Chapman coming back, I think you have things pretty set in your lineup right now. We'll see what the lineup looks like tonight, and we can get into that more on the other side in terms of just now that the lineup is whole, what do we want to see from Bob Melvin? Or what are the expectations for Bob Melvin? Because I've said I think it's playoffs or bust for Bob Melvin, and I think that still remains true. So we can get into that on the other side. Just a reminder, tonight at 5 o'clock, Valkyries are taking on the Minnesota Lynx in Minnesota. Go to Minnesota. You can catch that game on the Valkyries channel on the Odyssey app. Download the app and search Valkyries so you can find it. That is Dan Devone. I am Sam Lubman. We got about another hour and a half of Giants talk. We're 30 minutes away from Justice De Los Santos joining the show, so still plenty to go. We'd love to hear from all the Giants fans out there. 888-957-9570 is the number. The expectations on Bob Melvin, they are going up right now, despite anything the Giants lineup might or might not be doing. We'll talk about that and more, brought to you by Fremont Bank. Here for you, here for good.
Minnesota!
best Giants talk in the Bay on 95.7 The Game.
Yeah. That's what we're doing here. It's the wrap. The Orange and Black Weekend Wrap. Dan Lovin, Dan Devone. 888-957-9570 is the number. Yeah, that is a very unsettling yeah. Yeah, I don't like that at all.
It's Jimmy Butler.
Oh, that's Jimmy's yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't like that at all with this music. Sounds very unsettling. But anyway, yeah, so we're talking about the Bob Melvin option being picked up this week and what it means for the Giants for the rest of the year. But I think there's another layer to it, too, and that is what it means for Buster Posey. Because Buster, again, he put out the vote of confidence for Bob Melvin this week. And he told Susan Slusser, the San Francisco Chronicle, this is what he said, I believe it was on Monday. When he said this, he said, I have the utmost confidence in Bob and the coaching staff. There's that vote of confidence that we were talking about. Whether you're a player or coach, sometimes there are going to be things that go your way and things that don't. You make the best decision you can. I know for certain that being around Bob and his staff as much as I have been the last 5 months, they're very prepared and they're in great positions to make the right decisions. So he said that on Monday to Susan Slusser. And then next day, Bob Melvin got his option picked up. And Buster Posey said this afterwards. Sometimes when you're going through a rough patch, there's a tendency to want to point the finger at the coaches. And if anybody deserves any blame from the top, it should be on me. It shouldn't be on our managers or coaching staff. I'm the one who sets the roster. So I felt like with all those things considered, this was a good time for me to show my belief in Bob and his coaching staff. So as much heat and pressure as there might be on Bob Melvin and the Giants coaching staff, did Buster Posey bring extra heat and pressure onto him? Because this is a very, very public declaration of confidence Buster Posey made here. And he said that if there is any blame, it should be on him. After all, this is the roster that he built. So with that being said, then how much of this blame do you put on Buster Posey for how this season's gone? And again, as I said earlier in the show, Dan, Buster Posey is a guy who has absolutely backed up his words with actions. Or is there another action that Buster Posey takes here to back up these words? And again, as we are 26 days from the trade deadline, is Buster basically creating another situation or is Buster setting himself up to make another move to maybe bolster this roster as a way to help Bob Melvin out here?
I'd be surprised if he didn't. I think that when Buster Posey made the career choice of the decision to be the president of baseball ops for the San Francisco Giants, inherently you live with pressure every day. There are different levels, right? Aside from winning a World Series, every GM deals with pressure. And again, I don't see this necessarily the pressure by marrying himself to Bob Melvin because it's only an option for a year. It's not a 5 or 7 year deal. And again, if the Giants struggle in the second half of the season, he can get out from underneath that and go find his guy. I would have waited, but I totally respect and understand what it is that he's doing, but give him a vote of confidence at this time of the year. To me, there's no harm in waiting until the end of the season or at least latter part of the year. But if this is what he decided to do, don't have any issues with it. I think the pressure with Buster Posey is going to be, when you look at this team, we'll talk about Robbie Ray, but we have to keep in mind that Farhan fleeced the Mariners for Robbie Ray.
Well, that's what's kind of the underlying irony of the 2025 Giants is just how much of this roster was built by Farhan Zaidi and how Buster is simply utilizing a lot better than Farhan was ever able to. And Dan, I know you mentioned that, it is just an option. It's not that hard to get out from under it. But the reason why I kind of push back at that and why I think Buster is kind of marrying himself to Bob Melvin is I think when you, as publicly as Buster did this past week, go out and throw your vote of confidence behind your guy like that, behind Bob Melvin like that, like people are going to notice that. People are going to notice that that kind of a declaration, that declaration of confidence that Buster Posey made for Bob Melvin. That is noticeable. It's not nothing, especially being done in the kind of malaise that the Giants are in right now. And there's a part of me that thinks that, yeah, the Giants could easily just, if things go south this year, they could punt on Bob Melvin after this year, eat the option year, and find someone else. Buster brings in his own guy. But when you put your confidence behind someone so publicly, I don't know if you really then have the option then just pivot off of him after the end of the year, because he's got to think about his own credibility in this sense too. Now, Buster Posey says, I believe in Bob Melvin. Here's that option. And then at the end of the year, you pull the rug out from under him and start looking for a new coach, a new manager and coaching staff. Well, now your votes of confidence have a lot less significance and a lot less weight going forward because, well, you just say, well, the last time you gave a vote of confidence, you ended up firing the guy. And I don't know if that's a situation that Buster wants to put himself in, to where he's saying one thing and giving off one vibe, but then pivots in the exact opposite direction later on.
I hear you, but I guess, again, the fact that it's only for a year is a vote of confidence, certainly, but there's not a lot of security there. It's 1 year. So let's say that the Giants take the pipe in the second half of the season and they finish well back of the last wild card spot and don't go to the playoffs. It's a major disappointment. The feeling is pretty bad around the team. We're taking calls about Bob Melvin's got to go. Maybe he stays with Melvin going into 26, but that's a short leash. And I don't think that if they get off to a slow start next year, then he has every right, to me, to get rid of Bob Melvin and still be a guy of his word.
Do you really think Buster would? So in that situation, Buster's basically, if the Giants don't make the playoffs this year, let's say they finish below 500 this year, and then you're still bringing back Bob Melvin next year, you're basically in the same situation where at the start of this season, where you got a manager with a lame duck contract, so to speak, except this time there is going to be no option to bail him out with. And what you're then looking at is, if things go south, do you eat it for the whole year and go look for a new manager at the end of the 2026 season? Or do you try and do something that has so rarely been done in Giants history and make an in-season managerial change? Like when Gabe Kapler was fired with 3 games left, that wasn't really an in-season. That was basically like, Farhan let the cat out of the bag a couple days too early, and rather than let Gabe face questions for 3 days, let's just cut the cord now and move on with our lives and have Kai Correa finish the season out. The Giants don't normally do in-season firings. That's not something the teams really want to do. And I don't know if Buster Posey wants to put himself in a situation where, a year from now, this time next year, we're talking about how Buster Posey had to go back on his confidence and fire Bob Melvin in the middle of June or something like that and install an interim manager. And what you're potentially looking at then is 2 lost years from Buster Posey with a roster that, out of nowhere is actually very win now. You got Adames for 6 years, Chapman for 4 years, Jung Hoo Lee for 4 more years, Devers for 8 more, Webb for 3 more, Ray will be back next year. You got guys like Elliot Ramos, Landon Roop, Hayden Birdsong, who are looking like they're going to be around for a long time. Like, this has low-key become a roster that is ready to win right now. And I think it's a risky move for Buster to put this level of confidence on Bob Melvin if next year we risk being in the same situation, making a managerial change.
Which is why I think that I wouldn't be surprised if this team struggles in the latter part of this season, that he would make a change over the offseason. Because I don't think you're going to let, and granted, you want to be a man of your word as a GM, a new GM, but you can't let these windows that rarely present themselves when they're open to potentially get back to a World Series close because you want to keep your word. And that's just sort of the new world that he's entered into. All right, this is the life of a GM. And it's all, unfortunately, it's very linear. He's now just judged on wins and losses and playoff appearances. This is the pressure I was talking about when Buster Posey wanted to step into an executive role. You are judged by, look at Michael Jordan, goes from the greatest player of all time to an owner of the Charlotte Hornets, and suddenly, you suck. He's not, he was impervious to that.
We can go keep it local here. Chris Mullen was an absolute legend. And then, growing up for me, he was the embattled GM. Now, years have passed and Mully has his rightful place in Warriors history now. But that's kind of where I'm kind of getting at here, Dan, is, Buster, he's wanting to take on this blame here because I think we all agree, like, Buster's approval rating. If we were to take a Gallup approval poll of Buster Posey, my guess is he would be polling very high, probably in the 80s or 90s, whereas Bob Melvin probably polling a little bit lower right now. Buster has that equity and wherewithal to take the blame and hit right now, but that's not going to last forever. And I'm just kind of curious, so when Buster throws out this public declaration of confidence, what's he going to do maybe now to back it up? And that's where I start looking at the trade deadline and think, well, are we starting to see a situation where, with the pitching being what it is Buster Posey going to set the Giants up to where they can add, again, it doesn't have to be a top-of-the-line starter, but a 3-4 starter at minimum is absolutely needed because, right, what we saw last night is basically just proof that, or further proof, or further confirmation, further whatever you want to call it, the Giants cannot count on Justin Verlander every 5 days to take them out and give this team a chance to win.
Yeah, I think they're going to be active in trying to get a pitcher. I think they almost have to. I think just getting back to the pressure of Buster Posey, when you think about the moves that he's made, and I'm online with all of them. Is there anybody that disagrees getting Devers at the time? We were all rejoicing.
Oh, everyone was going nuts about it.
You had to do it.
Just because it hasn't, again, we got 8 years to make this deal work.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter if it doesn't work in the first 3-4 weeks.
Exactly. But there is, you have to entertain because this has happened before when it comes to see Chris Bryant. There are players out there that never materialize. And Willie Adames hasn't played well and certainly up to his standard to this point. And so to your point, when you look at the San Francisco Giants, the best players are all Farhan products, from Elliot Ramos to Matt Chapman to Logan Webb and to Robbie Ray and the bullpen as well. Now, that's not an indictment that Buster Posey doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah. You can make the argument that also Matt Chapman is still here because of Buster Posey.
True, but
yeah, to your point, though,
depending on
you could split the blame, you could split the credit on Chapman, but the rest of the roster, though, is very much Farhan's creation.
Yeah, and so going forward, as he makes this team under his vision, there's a lot of the pressure is going to mount for guys like that of Devers to hit the ball and be Rafi Devers. Willie Adames has got to play much better, but this is. When you sign up to be the president of baseball ops, this is the risk you inherit, right? Like it's you inherit because it's not like when you're a player, you can control your own destiny. If I'm 0 for 4, that's on me. Or if I go 3 for 4 and hit 2 bombs, that's on me. But he can't hit for Devers. He can't do anything about that. And so it's sort of the new role for Buster Posey is in a lot of ways beyond his control. And while all of us agree with the moves, there is precedence where Devers could be a bust. Adames could be a bust. And this could go really bad for Buster Posey. And it's you can blame it on him because it just comes with the territory. But
the buck has to stop somewhere, yeah.
All moves that I think we were all on board with at the time.
Yeah, again, there's a lot of people who love the Barry Zito move when it happened. And there's a lot of people who didn't love it. That's usually how these things go, and that's the unfair rap, I guess you could say, that guys in these positions have to deal with for Buster. So it's Buster. He's putting it out there. He's putting himself out there. He's going out on a limb for these guys, and I respect the move. It's a vote of confidence that I don't think the prior regime would have ever given, at least not as full-throatedly as Buster Posey did, but. The downside is that I do believe it brings more of a magnifying glass now on what Buster does and what Buster does not do and what the results of Buster's moves are. Now, again, I bring up Verlander because that was one of Buster's early moves that he brought in to provide innings for this pitching rotation. And it's, every year for the last few years, the Giants, they've come in thinking they got enough pitching, and then inevitably in the summer, you're always scrambling. Now, again, the Giants have a little bit more pitching depth this year than they have in the past. They're not going to have to resort to, go into openers to 2 to 3 times a week. But what we saw from Justin Verlander last night, and I had a chance to ask him, his introductory presser, what his goals are for this year. And here's what Verlander said. This is back in January about what he kind of hopes to accomplish this year.
I wouldn't be coming back and playing if I've accomplished enough in my career. I wouldn't be back if I didn't think I could be great. I really, truly believe that the experiences I had last year and leading into this year, I can be back to the pitcher I was not all that long ago when I won a Cy Young. So, I put in the work. I put in the work for the last, since I was 5 years old, I've been playing baseball, So all that work, my whole life, I still feel like I have something to give. And if I still feel like that, then I want to play.
So, again, he's trying to prove that he still has it. And it's just what we've been seeing, especially we've seen glimpses of it. But the last few starts, Dan, it's just not there for Justin Verlander. And now it's at a point to where it's like, again, the weather's going to get warmer. Pitchers tend to wear down in July and August and into September. He's 43 years old, not getting any younger. Yesterday was 20 years since his debut.
Yeah.
At what point do you just make the call? Do you just call it on Verlander and say, it's just not happening this year?
I think you got to be a little bit more patient, as ridiculous as that might sound. He has, and maybe you can talk to this because I have never seen him in the locker room. But almost to a man, people talk about his presence. He has a big personality.
I'll agree with that. It's there
in that locker room, and there are a lot of people that respond to him. He's doing everything except win games or win one game. Sort of like Willie Adames, who has a huge presence and has become sort of the Derek Jeter of this team, but hasn't really played well up until, he's shown signs of late, which is a good thing. Here's why it's really amplified now more than ever when you talk about Birdsong and especially Verlander, is because it was a concern early on in the season, but you had Kyle Harrison. And so while it was a concern, there was a safety net.
You had a guy you could turn to who, and again, we could say what you will about Kyle Harrison, whether or not you believe that he was a good pitcher or not. He was good enough that he could take them out and get you some quality innings. And you don't have that anymore. Now, we did see a guy last night, Mason Black, made his season debut with the Giants, and we're talking about how, the ridiculousness of playing in Sutter Health Park. Mason Black made his, not his major league debut, but his 2025 debut with the Giants in the very ballpark that he was already pitching in as a member of the Sacramento Rivercats. So welcome to the big Mason Black. Welcome to the bigs, Mason Black. But again, it wasn't his first game, so I'm not going to get too angry about it. But Black, I thought, pitched well enough. And he dealt with that, umpiring delay before the sixth inning, unfortunately. But he pitched well enough last night where it's like, you know what? I'd be willing to see a little bit more Mason Black. Now, if he, comes in, on Sunday, I don't think he'll pitch tonight. But if he comes in Sunday or Monday and gets lit up, then that might change the conversation a little bit. But the Giants do have options in the minor leagues that they can try and go to. I did like what we saw from Mason Black. I'd be curious to see what Carson Wisenhunt, though he's got a 4.50 ERA in AAA right now, so not sure how close he is to arriving. But I would like to see what some of these younger options look like before the Giants go venturing out into the trade market again, because Mason Black is a guy who I wanted the Giants to use Mason Black in a trade package 2 years ago when the Giants did absolutely nothing at the trade deadline. He could be a guy at this trade deadline, Dan, who could very much be a guy who can help bring back a back end of the rotation piece for the Giants, because you're not going to have to break the bank for a starting pitcher at the deadline. I don't think the Giants need to do that. Go get a guy like Steven Risotto brought up Zach Eflin before the game. Charlie Morton is another guy, even at 41 years old. That's a guy who I can count on. Heck, the guy who is starting tonight for the A's, Luis Severino, would be a perfect option for the Giants based off the money he's making, the years he has left, and the disdain he has for pitching at Sutter Health Park. So there are options there for the Giants to kind of correct his pitching. It's just a matter of how aggressive Buster will be and addressing those pitching needs. 888-957-9570 is the number. We're getting up against it soon, but before we do, got to go to one of our favorites out in Mountain View, Jan in Mountain View. How you doing, Jan? You are on the wrap.
Good morning, you two. I just want to point out, and I don't know why, but I remember in the past when we had Flannery, was that the guy at the third base or whatever? But when there were runners in scoring position, he would, give a signal like a bunt or something. Well, Bailey is up there and he's got a poor batting average. Why advance the runner? I'm screaming, I'm like, gee whiz, put down a bunt. You've done it before. Same thing with, what's that guy they put back on second base that has the speed,
Tyler Fitzgerald?
For heaven's sake, stop striking out. Advance the runner. Gee whiz. You see that you're not. You're not helping out. Hitting the long ball or whatever. Advance the runner. Let's try to get some runs for this pitcher. You're just wasting it back.
Very well said, Jan. That's the entire 3-hour show summed up into a 2-minute call from Jan in Mountain View right there. Yeah, the situational hitting, taking those moments. Here's the thing, to Jan's point, and what frustrates me is the Giants been doing a lot of this throughout the season. There have been a lot of times where Bob Melvin's been using the first and second, no outs, let's drop a bunt to move guys up just to kind of get some runs across. But then they go away from it at the weirdest times. It's like, when they do things that work and then stop doing those things and then they struggle, it's like, Bob, what are you doing, man?
Well, that's another one of the criticisms. I'm not piling on Bob Melvin because I've never really been a big fan of his, but he doesn't have a real identity as a coach. Usually a team, love or hate, again, getting back to Gabe Kapler at least went out his way, right? He was a guy that was heavy on the metrics and algorithms, and I said...
You knew what he was bringing to the table.
And I don't know what Bob Melvin, in terms of a sort of manager, is as far as style is concerned. By the way, great to hear someone bring back the gee whiz. That's the lesson to you young fellas, Pasta. Not everything has to be a profanity, okay? You can go a gee golly, gee whiz from time to time.
Oh, it's like great googly moogly.
Hey, really quick, just
heck yes.
Before we get to the break, I just wanted to talk about the young pitchers. I'm not a fan of bringing up the Mason Blacks. I don't want to see the Wizenhunts, not this time of the year, because as we're seeing with the Hayden Birdsong, there's something to veteran pitchers, especially if you're trying to get into the postseason. You don't want to see guys that are learning on the job or when they hit the wall trying to self-correct like that of Birdsong, which is almost inevitable, which is why I'm with you. I would move some of those young arms because right now it's about getting to the playoffs this year, and we'll worry about tomorrow when it presents itself. Go get a veteran arm instead of a young pitcher coming up right now, where more often than not, the moment is too big for them.
Exactly. Again, as we said, this is a roster that is ready to win now. I think it was Instant on the YouTube chat. So, this team never went through a proper rebuild. No, they didn't. But here they are on the other side with a team that, on paper, by all accounts, is ready to win right now. And so you have assets to move to make that happen. I don't know how married to your farm system you have to be right now in terms of using it to funnel talent to your big league team. Use it to bring in talent to supplement your big league team here at the deadline. So maybe Justice De Los Santos has some ideas as to who the Giants could be targeting at the deadline. One of the hardest working guys on the Giants beat, covers the Giants for the Bay Area News Group. We'll chat with him on the other side on the River Islands guest line. All that brought to you by Fremont Bank. Here for you, here for good.
had to reinvent the wheel. And even after the game, he was already working on, new mechanical things, trying to figure out how to be more deceptive, trying to figure out how to maximize the stuff that he has. And, one of the numbers that kind of gets lost in yesterday's outing is that he still did have 10 whiffs on 60 pitches. That's a very healthy percentage. But for him, it's going to be about when he gets in those 2-strike counts, how does he put guys away? He pointed to the Brent Rooker double, and I believe at the bottom of the second, where it's 95 and away, just not a pitch that anybody should hit, and Rooker kind of beats him to the spot. Pointing to that one in particular as an instance where it's like that's where I need to be more deceptive. So, the baseline numbers certainly don't paint a pretty picture, but the Giants are going to keep Verlander for the time being. He is going to get that one more start before the All-Star break. And the one thing that I will, want to remind Giants fans is this is a team that no longer has Kyle Harrison to fall back on. This is a team that even doesn't have Jordan Hicks to fall back on. When you start looking at their rotation options, if you just punted Verlander, as a lot of Giants fans probably want to do, it's Carson Wisenut, who hasn't made a Major League start, Carson Seymour, who hasn't made a Major League start. There's Ragsdale as well, Trevor McDonald. It's a lot of guys that have limited to no Major League experience. So unless the Giants have or acquire a viable option over the course of the next couple of weeks, it is going to be Verlander for the time being.
Hey, Justice, as bad as it's been for Verlander, it's been equally bad for that of Hayden Birdsong. What is the level of concern for the Giants, for their young pitcher going forward?
I wouldn't say there's much concern because they remember that this is a 23-year-old kid who's still learning the Major League level and still learning the ebbs and flows. And I mentioned this a while ago, is that, one executive told me that when you're evaluating young starting pitchers, you almost have to throw the first 150 innings of their career out the window because they are still learning the ropes of the Major League level. I think that it's a fair, a lot of fans want a young guy to instantly come up and succeed. We saw those glimpses with Birdsong last year. Then we saw some early glimpses this year, especially when he was in the bullpen. But the last 2 outings haven't been great. 4 walks and back-to-back starts, and not just the 4 walks, but 2 outings where it just kind of out of nowhere he's really lost his command, and you blink and his outing's over. And this is always going to be part of the development process. There is always development that happens at the Major League level. Birdsong's kind of Achilles heel last year was the command. This year we're kind of seeing those glimpses of the command as well. But when he's on, we do see the strikeout stuff, the fastball that he's able to combine with the kick change that he throws, with the breaking balls. The talent is there, but again, the Giants are going to continue preaching patience with him. He's going to make his start on Sunday against the A's. And again, kind of similar to how they don't have an option if they were to hypothetically, punt Verlander from the rotation. They wouldn't. It would kind of be the same thing with Birdsong. So they kind of have the guys they have right now. And, especially with a guy as young as Birdsong is, the best thing that they can do is give him these opportunities, let him figure things out at the Major League level, because the alternative is that he doesn't get those opportunities to figure things out at all.
Justin, you mentioned, again, if the Giants do move off Verlander, they need someone to kind of fill in those innings in that situation there. We are, I believe, 25, 26 days away from the trade deadline. Is there any pitchers that you've kind of, when you look around the league, are there any names that kind of catch your attention as a potential target that the Giants might look at should they decide to dive into the pitching trade market here?
Haven't had an opportunity to dive into any names yesterday, but if the A's are willing to get rid of a certain left-handed starting pitcher that pitched 6 shutout innings last night, that would be certainly an enticing topic. But I do think that not necessarily a name, but if you kind of tried to think of who it would probably be, a 4th or 5th starter to really round out the rotation to give them some depth. They don't necessarily need to go after that front-end ace necessarily, especially given the seasons that Logan Webb is having. He's probably going to be an all-star. Robbie Ray as well, who's certainly deserving of being an all-star. And even Landon Roop, who since May, even with some of the inconsistencies that he's had, and even with his last outing kind of going a bit off the rails in the 5th inning and, him not being able to get through 5, you do have at the top end of this rotation some pretty reliable guys, but it is going to be the matter of getting that one more guy that can really slot into maybe that 3rd or 4th spot in the rotation, because if you think ahead to a possible playoff series where you're going to need multiple guys going, you are going to need someone aside from Ray and Webb to potentially provide 5, 6, 7 innings in meaningful baseball games.
Hey, Justice, as we talk about the bullpen for a second, there are 2 guys that are clearly reliable right now, and that's being Rogers and Rodriguez. Ryan Walker's been a bit of a mystery. Can you sort of put your arms around him and describe to Giant fans where he's at these days?
Yeah, it's definitely been a roller coaster of a year for. Actually, can you? I think I misheard the reliever. Which reliever are you talking about?
Oh, Ryan Walker.
Ryan Walker. I heard the R sounded through me off. My apologies. But yeah, it's been a roller coaster of a year for Ryan Walker. He obviously starts the season as the team's closer, has a really tough stretch. They stick with him in the closer's role for as long as possible, and then they end up switching from him to Camilo Doval. And the thought process was that maybe he could still be one of the leverage arms in this bullpen, but he's kind of fallen out of being one of those guys, because if you kind of work backwards from it, Camilo Doval is the closer. Tyler Rogers typically has the eighth. Randy Rodriguez typically has the seventh. And what was kind of telling was that on, I believe it was Wednesday, when the Giants had that bullpen game, instead of potentially going to Ryan Walker in the sixth, manager Bob Melvin went with Spencer Bivens, who pitched a scoreless sixth with 2 strikeouts. And even when there was a bases loaded, no out situation in the 5th inning of that game, Melvin went to Eric Miller to put out that fire. So I think that for right now, it's probably a matter of trying to get him, his confidence back, trying to get him some reps or some opportunities to consistently put up zeros, because as we saw last year, this is a guy who, when he's on, when he's working, when he's cross-firing, he has the potential to be one of the best relievers in that bullpen. But just as of right now, over the course of these first 3 months of the season, we just haven't consistently seen him hit that form.
Justice, first off, Justice De Los Santos here joining us on the Orange and Black Weekend Wrap, courtesy of the River Islands guest line. Be sure to check out his YouTube channel, too. Just search Justice De Los Santos, all sorts of great Giants coverage there. Find him on Twitter, just De Los Santos on Twitter. Justice, we got some news yesterday that Matt Chapman was beginning his rehab assignment, and the intention is that he will be in the lineup for the Giants tonight. As I assume that's still the plan, that Matt Chapman will be activated in the lineup tonight. And you got to see him take batting practice at Chase Field on Thursday. How did he look swinging the bat? How's he looked pregame fielding grounders? And again, is he still on track to be in the lineup tonight?
He's still on track to be in the lineup tonight, and he has been itching to get back over the course of the last couple of weeks. It feels like with every box that he checked, he was progressively getting more and more eager to be back in the lineup. And I will kind of temper expectations a little bit with Chapman's return, at least offensively speaking. I think we do have to kind of remember the last time, prior to yesterday, the last time that he had faced opponents in game was June 8th. So it's been roughly a month in between him facing not only velocity, but major league caliber stuff. So I would imagine the first couple games there might be some getting reacclimated to major league velocity, major league speed. He did say after taking batting practice on Chase Field the other day that he was frustrated with where his swing is at. And that kind of tells me that it is going to be, take him a couple days to really get back into, no pun intended, get back into the swing of things. But he does provide the Giants, with that middle of the option order. He does lengthen their lineup. That'll probably, instead of having, Casey Schmidt or Christian Goss, Brett Wisey, Wilmer Flores at third base, they have their 5-time Gold Glover. And that's the part of this that the Giants fans are going to be able to rely on. He is still going to be able to provide that defense. And I think there's also just a stabilizing factor with Chapman as well. He is kind of this team's emotional heartbeat. And for a team that's lost 8 of their last 11 games, I think along with just having Chapman in the lineup and all the production that he provides, I think just having him physically out there kind of as their leader on the position player side is going to be a huge boost as well.
Is there any chance, and listen, anything can happen, right, in baseball, but if this team really goes south over the next couple of weeks, could the Giants be sellers at the deadline?
I think it would be it'd have to be a really drastic next couple of weeks, especially given how well this team performed in April, given how they've hovered above that 500 line, well, even more than hovered above that 500 line for most of the season. But, you do face the Phillies and the Dodgers to end the first half, and then you kind of go from there with the Blue Jays and the Braves. It is going to be a tough gauntlet once the Giants finish up this 3-game set against the A's. I think it would, never say never, but I think it would take something pretty drastic over these next couple of weeks for the Giants to consider being sellers, given that they have invested a lot in this team. They signed Willie Adames. They went out and got Rafael Devers, who's not going to be cheap. This is clearly a team that wants to contend this year, and I think, again, it would take a lot over the course of these next couple of weeks for the Giants to even consider, nevertheless do, become sellers.
If they did become sellers, it would be even more shocking considering the news that broke this week, Justice, that Bob Melvin had his option for next year picked up. Buster Posey saying that he picked it up as a way to show some confidence to Bob and his coaching staff here. I'm just kind of curious, what were your thoughts on that news when it broke, and on the timing of Buster Posey exercising that option for Bob Melvin next year?
Yeah, you just hit on it right there. The timing was clearly the most fascinating element of this. And when we talked to Posey, he said there wasn't necessarily anything intentional about the timing. He said that this is something that the team has been working on for 3 to 4 weeks. Whether or not you want to subscribe to that belief is up to you and the individual. But, this is a team at the time of that move. I think they had lost 7 of their previous 8 games. Even now they've lost, I think it's 8 of the last 11 games. And in making that decision when he did, Buster Posey essentially sent 2 different messages. The first being that he not only has belief in Melvin, but the entire of the coaching staff. And again, I'm on Twitter. I see all the things about Pat Burrell and Matt Williams and all the vitriol directed at them. But it was a backing of Melvin and the entire coaching staff. And the second part of that message is that the team, plain and simple, needs to perform better. He didn't say it super blunt in the way that Davey Martinez said it a while back, but Posey was pretty candid and said, as a former player, there comes a point where even with all the messaging that you get from the coaches, even with everything that they're helping you out with, at the end of the day, there's only really one person responsible for your career, and that's the player themselves. So the timing of the thing was the most important thing, or the most significant aspect of that move. He is giving Melvin confidence going forward. And again, it kind of bleeds into that idea that this is the team that wants to win now, and this is the team that believes they can win now.
Justice, talk about Robbie Ray and specifically his performance the other night, because usually it's about this long before a player, they say, usually feels at full strength after Tommy John surgery, and that's right about where he's at as far as his rehab is concerned. Is this legitimate going forward in terms of the Giants having a 1-2 punch, and there's not going to be another shoe that's going to drop in terms of Robbie Ray going south?
I mean, Robbie Ray this entire season has looked really good. And if you kind of look at his timeline over the course of the last couple of years, 2023, he has the Tommy John surgery. When he returned in 2024, it was more than anything about getting him reacclimated to just being a major league starting pitcher. I don't think the Giants had any expectations that he was going to go out every 5 days and throw 6 innings. But when we talked to Ray after the complete game the other day, he said that it's typically it takes about 18 to 20 months post-surgery to start really feeling like yourself again. And during spring training, that was when he personally hit that point of feeling like himself again. And pretty much since his first start of the season looks very reminiscent of the 2021 Robbie Ray that we saw, who won his first career Cy Young. It is a little bit of a different mix compared to there, but because he's significantly older now, I believe he's now 33. But, the grunts are as loud as ever. He's attacking guys with that fastball at the top of the zone. He introduced the changeup to his repertoire earlier this year. And for as well as Logan Webb has pitched this year, Robbie Ray has just kept pace with him for the entirety of the season. I believe Ray, even at this juncture, has a lower ERA than Webb. And it's going to be interesting to see how the all-star rosters shake out. Sometimes we'll see teams get multiple starting pitchers. I think the Braves and the Phillies got it last year. Sometimes not, and there's no shortage of guys on this team that are deserving. And I think if you were to ask the 25 other guys in that Giants clubhouse if Robbie Ray was deserving of an all-star candidacy, I believe they would all say an affirmative yes.
Justice De Los Santos here joining us on the Orange and Black Weekend Wrap with Sam Lubman and Dan Devone. Check out his YouTube channel. Just search Justice De Los Santos on YouTube. Find him on Twitter, Just De Los Santos, at Just De Los Santos. Last one here for you, Justice, is every time I see Rafael Devers run, Kruk or Kipe have to mention that he is nursing a bit of a sore groin. How concerning Is the groin with Rafi Devers, is it a thing? I assume the Giants are trying to take it easy with him. Is it going to impact when he, takes the field and plays some first base? What is the status of that groin, and should Giants fans be worried about it getting worse?
As far as the groin, one thing that we actually found out in Phoenix over the couple days ago was that in addition to the groin, he's also been having a little bit of a back thing as well, and so those things all kind of meld into one another, and it is very, very visible. Like whenever there's been a couple doubles that he's had over the course of the last couple games, and after he rounds first, and once he kind of knows he's got a double, he really shuts the engines off, and it just does not look entirely majestic. The one thing that the Giants have said is that it's not impacting his hitting at this current juncture. It is going to impact when he plays first base, because obviously if he's, one of the big parts of being a first baseman is stretching, and, having to throwing him out in first base wouldn't exactly help as far as aiding the groin. But they are going to have the All-Star break in a couple of days, whether or not Devers is part of those National League All-Star teams after being the leading vote getter in the American League. That kind of remains to be seen. As far as, whether or not it gets worse, it's tough to say. I wish I could have the medical reasoning as to whether it could or couldn't, but they're saying it hasn't impacted his swing. They're kind of going to limit him as far as the fielding. He is still taking pregame grounders at first base. There was kind of the potential of him playing third base, once Christian Koch suffered the injury and they were down, they're all three third basemen, but I don't think that's going to be something that materializes anytime soon with Chapman getting back. So I think they're going to continue managing it. It might put the opportunity for him to play first base really up in the air this year, just because they want to manage it. But we'll kind of wait and see how much progress he's able to make with that over the next couple weeks.
Awesome stuff, Justice. Really appreciate you joining us on the show today, and thanks for coming on. We'll have to do it again soon.
Yes, sir. I'll have that F1 review for y'all in a couple weeks.
All right, we'll get you back on for that, and I'll see you at the yard tonight.
Yes, sir.
All right, take care, Justice. That was Justice De Los Santos joining us on the River Islands guest line. Covers the Giants for the Bay Area News Group. Again, you can find all of his content on YouTube and on Twitter at Just De Los Santos on Twitter. And wow, a lot there to unpack. Some interesting stuff about Bob Melvin and the message that Buster Posey sent. But then right there at the end, the Rafi Devers groin. He's also got a back issue as well that is not impacting his hitting, but it is going to impact how quickly he gets on the field. And all I heard there, Dan, is the most important hitter in the Giants lineup, or the best power hitter in the Giants lineup, has a groin and back issue. That gives me some concerns right there.
Well, and it's not so much for this year, but when you think about the portly fella and you're invested in this dude for an extended period of time and you got to eat like 250 scahoots of that $300 million deal, big boys don't necessarily age well.
No, and that's a lot of weight for those ligaments to carry around.
I hate it.
And Devers is going to spend a lot of his time with the Giants in his 30s. And as someone who is also in their 30s, Dan, for whatever it is, and Risotto, you'll learn this in about 20 years when you yourself turn 30, the back starts to go very early in your 30s there. So, and then, factor in the weight. That does not get me super optimistic about Rafi Devers in his health there. Now, Justin did mention that the All-Star break is coming up. That does offer a chance for Devers to get off his feet, but if he's part of the festivities, obviously, that changes the conversation. What I really wanted him to say was, no, it's not that big of a deal. And instead, he went the complete opposite direction on that one.
I still give him a bit of a pass that I think everything he's been through, like the trade, and then having Boston come in that next week and do those interviews for the Boston media, the San Francisco media, that he just needs to sort of settle in and just get into his space and his comfort zone mentally.
I mean, I agree with that. And I do think that factor is absolutely there. But when I also see the fact, every time I see him run now, I'm going to get nervous because, I don't want that groin injury to get worse because that thing could linger. And now I'm seeing the bat too. Listen, if he doesn't play a single inning on defense this year, I am totally cool with that. I am cool with Dom Smith and Wilmer Flores handling things at first. Got Chapman there at third. Casey Schmidt to fill in from time to time. I don't need Rafi Devers to play first base this year. That's fine. But I do need Rafi Devers to stay healthy and at least stay in the lineup. When I hear back and groin, that I just hope those things hold up the rest of the year. But wow, very concerning there. Less concerning lately, though, is William Thomas. I want to get into why on the other side. And then, I want to get into what Justice said about Robbie Ray, who looking very much like an all-star pitcher again. About 30 minutes to go here on the wrap. We'll be back, and that is all brought to you by Fremont Bank. Here for you, here for good.
Now back to the Orange and Black Weekend Wrap on 95.7 The Game.
Get a little electric feel going here. Like it. It's one of the few songs on our rejoins that I actually know. It is the Orange and Black Weekend Wrap. Sam Blubman here along with Dan Devone. Final innings here. Is that what we say? We say innings here on the show instead of final stretch.
Ninth inning?
The ninth inning here. We got to close this out.
Sam, do you know why I played Electric Feel?
Why did you play Electric Feel?
There's a Tim Lincecum sighting in San Francisco recently.
Really?
No way. Well, we were
was.
supposed to have a Bryce check, but since Bryce is on the mend right now, I guess we have a Timmy update. Risotto, can you give us what are the details of this Tim Lincecum update?
Yeah, so there's a picture that went viral of somebody in a San Francisco neighborhood. I think it was the Mission District, if I'm not mistaken, and they saw a guy that looked like Tim Lincecum. It was a woman with her mother. And her mother went up to the guy and said, "Hey, you look like Tim Lincecum." And then the man said, "It's because I am." So Tim Lincecum is around a city that he's beloved in. How about that?
Awesome. Tim Lincecum in the Mission District. I wonder if he lives in that area. Sure, he's got houses in multiple locations.
Seattle, maybe. I know his late wife was a principal on the peninsula in a school in Burlingame, so he probably still has some Bay Area ties.
He used to live down in the Marina District back in the day.
Did you see him at the Dolphin Club?
No, not at the Dolphin Club, but he was at a club, and that club had a lot of alcohol. Him and Pat Burrell and those boys used to go hard.
Oh, I bet.
And he used to keep a little apartment, a little crash pad right there, not Union, but on Chestnut Street area. And that's really when the Giants...
That was in the heyday?
Like, it was almost Oakland Raider-esque. When you have the team that's living in that particular city that they play in, and they're hanging out in the local watering holes and rejoicing and identifying with the fan base, that to me... it doesn't get any better than that. That's the quintessential player-fan relationship that they captured for about a good 6 to 7 years there.
If the walls of that little loft could talk that Tim Lincecum had, the stories I'm sure those walls would tell. So last segment we had Justice De Los Santos, covers the Giants for the Bay Area News Group. He joined us on the River Islands guest line, and he had a lot to tell us here. He asked him about Birdsong, Verlander. Giants going to let him take that next start against the Dodgers, which, we've been saying, Dan, if you can't beat the White Sox and the A's, well, now it's like, well, you know what? You got to beat the Dodgers to avoid going into the All-Star break with a goose egg. That's just how this season has gone for Justin Verlander. But two interesting things he said towards the end. One was about Rafael Devers and the groin injury isn't serious, but he also has a back issue that isn't serious, but it is still something that's on the radar. The other interesting thing he said, we asked him about the timing with Bob Melvin, and he said, and Justice said that the timing was not intentional by Buster Posey, but that Buster was also sending basically two different messages, and that is there is a belief in the coaching staff and in Bob Melvin, and it was also a shot that the team needs to start playing better, which that kind of goes into the overall messaging that we've been hearing about when it comes to the Giants and the coaching staff is the players do need to play better, and hopefully the Giants the players can start to respond to that. So it seems like, it's still very much it's on the players, not the coaches, though we've been kind of talking about this morning how there is some blame to be put on Bob Melvin in terms of just the lineup and keeping guys confident. But yeah, I guess, are you, with all that being said, I guess, what do you take away from Justice kind of basically still reiterating what everyone else is saying in regards to the coaching staff?
Are you talking about Bob Melvin specifically, or just any of what it is that he mentioned during his half-hour interview? You want to stay with Bob Melvin?
Let's stay with Bob Melvin.
Okay, yeah. I think he sort of reiterated in his own way what it is that we were thinking about. I think that the timing is sort of, it's interesting because I think that those negotiations, we think of it as he offered the option while the team was in the midst of playing its worst baseball in the season. And that's partially true, but you have to understand that those negotiations probably were initiated when the team was actually doing well.
Yeah.
So they go back and forth, right? With the agent gets it, makes some addendums, it goes back to Buster, and then eventually it gets signed. It just so happened that it gets signed while the team was playing poorly. So I think the timing may not have been necessarily, oh, you know what, the team's playing its worst baseball in the season. Let me just go out and give this vote of confidence.
Yeah.
Because I think there's sort of a backstory to the whole contract situation.
Yeah, I don't think that Buster woke up on Monday morning. It's like, you know what? Let's pick up that option. He said with the Rafael Devers trade. I mean, we would have thought that trade came together, overnight almost. But they said that, that had been 3-4 weeks in the making there. So, yeah, the timing of it, probably something that took some time to get there. Again, he's putting the vote of confidence on the coaching staff, calling out the players. Are the players going to respond? One player who has been responding has been Willard Dibs. And Dan, back in the start of June, he was given a Sunday off against the Braves. It was the first game he missed all year because Willard Dibs said he wanted to be a 162 guy. But he took that Sunday, June 10th game off against the Braves. And that was the same day, I believe, that Matt Chapman injured his right hand of all days. And so he had that Sunday off. The Giants had the off day on Monday in Colorado. And then he came back. He had the great series in Colorado. Since then, Dan, he has really taken off. He is hitting 300 in that time, as I look at my notes here, a 380 on base, a 525 slugging percentage. And yeah, this is the best he's looked all year so far over the last 23 games. But the part that I'm kind of looking at that makes me think that Willard Dibs might be starting to come around, as I look at how the ball is leaving his bat. So last year, Dan, he had a career year. And during the best 23-game stretch that he had last year, this was from July 10th to August 8th. During that stretch, this is last year, he had an average exit velocity of about 92 miles an hour, a launch angle of 17.1 degrees, and a hard hit rate of about 48%. This is all according to Fangraphs. So that was last year during his best 22-game hitting stretch of the season. Over the last 22 games, I think this is going into last night, the exit velocity, 92 miles an hour, launch angle, 16.9, so a tick below 17.1, and the hard hit rate is at 44.8, so getting close to that rate what we saw last year. This is all me saying is that the way Willard Dibs is swinging the bat over the last 3 weeks is very similar to how he was swinging the bat during his hottest stretches of the year last year. Is that enough to make Giants fans feel confident that the Willard Dibs that the Giants paid $180 million to is finally starting to show up to do things other than just be a cheerleader in that dugout?
Well, time will tell, but it's certainly a good indication. And I would also add to that, his defense is much improved. And he does that with that infectious smile. All he needs to do is start hitting because everything else is there. The leadership, the fact that he is sort of this ambassador with the Latin players. He is such a good fit. And I think that when Devers came on board, I think that Willard Dibs, was instrumental in sort of welcoming him. And he just needs to start squaring things up because everything else, I think in terms of being the locker room guy, the defense is beginning to come around, which just goes to show, and this dates back to last year with Snell as well, that remember Snell's start last season, that patience is sort of a virtue when it comes to all of this stuff, and I think it might be applicable, which is why I think we should be willing to give Verlander another opportunity, because if Verlander turns the corner, now you get that veteran pitcher that maybe you would have gone out and traded for. So I think that the patience for Adames is beginning to pay off, and hopefully now this is something that is not going to be just sort of a rash of him hitting well and then he goes back to struggling again. But what's still really peculiar before you go is he did get a hit last night, but this dude still can't hit left-handers. And it's not only relegated to this year. His reverse splits are just weird for a guy who's a good right-handed hitter. He cannot hit left-handed pitching.
I mean, that's just everybody on the Giants this year, it seems. But
I mean, going back to his career.
It's longer term for him. You're right there. So again, I mean, if that's just who he is, that's just who he is. But I mean, I'm looking for other trends that suggest that he is progressing in the right direction. And Dan, I know I speak for a lot of Giants fans as well as myself, where we have all been driven crazy watching him swing at the slider low and away, especially the one that's outside the zone. And it's just early in the year, you knew you could get him to bite on that low and away slider every single time. And what I'm noticing, again, since going through into June 8th, in the first 2 months, he had 30 sliders away out of the zone that he swung and missed at. Since June 8th, though, he's had only 9 of those pitches. So if you extrapolate all that out, it's decreasing a little bit. They're showing some improvement there. He is, more importantly, though, he is laying off of those pitches that he spent the first 2 months of the season chasing wildly and flailing at. And, you know, I brought up the batted ball data. Batted ball data only tells you so much. You still got to look at what you're seeing at the plate. And when I see an Adames that isn't chasing balls or isn't chasing pitches as much as he was earlier on, that just adds to, as you were saying, I believe the patience is indeed paying off on Willie Adames.
Yeah, and that's one of those where it's easier said than done. And the same is applicable to Jung Hoo Lee. While we sit here and we're like, stay off of that pitch. You know where it's going to go, right? They have a book on you and they want to pitch you away, Jung Hoo Lee. And the same thing with a slider when it comes to Willie Adames. But when you're going through that and you're Willie Adames, that pitch is not a slider low and away. That's where it ends up. But when you're in your own head and you're struggling, that looks like something I can drive, right? But there's that whole that's why patience is so key for all of us when it comes to players as well as fans, is that baseball has always been that war of attrition. Like, you got to go through this crap. And the Giants may get to the playoffs and the Giants may get back to the series. And think about what Giant fans have had to endure over the last, 2 months. This has been worse than torture with this baseball team. The frustration,
abject misery and frustration. Yeah, we're banging our heads against the wall over this.
And so just to isolate it to one player, there's ebb and flow to a season and to a particular player, and going through slumps, it's all part of it. And so while it looks so easy for us, hey, Jung Hoo Lee, that pitch is low and away, while you're at the plate and the guy's on the bump and he's 90 feet away, that thing starts out like right in your wheelhouse, and then it ends up low and away. So it's all part of the process of playing this crazy sport.
Let's head out to the lines here, talk to one of our favorites. 888-957-9570 is the number. A few minutes left in the show here. Try and squeeze some thoughts in. Skills in Vallejo. He's got some thoughts on Bob Melvin. Skills is always one of my favorites. How are we doing today, Skills? You're on the wrap.
Hey, good morning there, Sam Lubman and Dan DeVoe. Good to be on with you. Yeah, about Bob Melvin, we're talking about a franchise that since 1986 has, even through different ownerships and different management people, has only had 6 managers. And so they're not going to, I think it would take a lot to make them cut ties with Melvin. It'd have to be close to a clubhouse mutiny, something along those lines, or just a complete 20-game losing streak, something big for them to cut ties with Melvin at this point in a relationship. But I think that's why Posey, who only played for really one manager his whole career, he had last year with Kapler, but, whatever. He knows how important stability can be. And the Giants have proven that. They've been, mostly successful using that formula over the years. So Melvin, he's made some mistakes. There's some things that are happening that should be happening. And I think a lot of that has to do with matters that he can't control, and some he can, but we'll just have to write it out, at least for the next year or into the next year, if they decide to cut ties with him halfway through. Moving on, I want to mention Jung Hoo Lee in the lineup, and we're talking about a guy here who missed a good chunk of last season. I wonder if something what's going on with him right now is fatigue. He is not a guy who I expected to run into this kind of wall offensively, especially not in the month of June into July. I expect a lot better from him. But then again, we forget he missed a good chunk of last year. He may not be completely, physically up to the demand of playing every day in the major leagues. He's facing pitchers who he's facing for the first time in his life, guys who throw like 110 miles an hour. And this is all, he's still adjusting. And I'm still going to be patient with him and write him out. And hopefully that he can figure some things out there before the end of the season. Because he's a professional hitter. He's a guy who can do some things that nobody else on the team can do. So I'm going to be patient with him. I'm talking like I have a choice, but you get what I'm saying. And the last point I want to make real quick was about Matt Chapman. I ran the numbers real quick, and this guy is going to be more important to the Giants than I think people even realize. He's hit 12 home runs this season. Each one has been a separate game, and the Giants have won 9 of those 12 games. So I'm hoping that he can provide that charge, that boost to the lineup that we so desperately need right now. He's been a winner everywhere he's been, Oakland, Toronto, and here in San Francisco they were winning up until he got hurt. So welcome back, Matt Chapman, or Matty Chill as I like to call him, and go Giants. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for that call of their skills. And, yeah, Matt Chapman should be back tonight, but as Justice De Los Santos said, Chapman frustrated with his swing, so that might not portend to a quick return to form for Matt Chapman. Before we get out of here, Dan, I want to talk a little bit about tonight's matchup really quick. Logan Webb on the Hill grew up an A's fan, grew up just a stone's throw away from Sutter Health Park over in Rockland, California. Went to Rockland High. He is 3-2 with a 3.61 career ERA and 7 starts against the A's. He was the starter on the Friday night game against the A's. Wilmer Flores hit those 3 home runs against the A's. He'll be going against Luis Severino, 2-9 with a 5.09 ERA, but 0-7 with a 3.79 ERA. In 57 innings pitched at Sutter Health Park, a 300 opponent batting average. He has made it absolutely clear how much he disdains pitching in that ballpark. So that is the starting matchup tonight. But the pitcher we talked about with Justice De Los Santos last segment there, Dan, was one Robbie Ray. And the start that he had on Thursday night against the Diamondbacks, going the full distance, throwing his first complete game of the year and looking every bit again like...
First since 2017, I think.
Yeah, so looking at, again, complete games are very hard to come by nowadays. And Robbie Ray looked everything like the dominant co-ace that that Giants fans were expecting him to be coming into this season.
Yeah, and I think it goes along the lines of Logan Webb, who is pitching tonight. Is what those two guys are doing this year is that they're eating innings. And Logan Webb, along with Robbie Ray, are amongst the league leaders, top 10, top 15 in terms of innings pitched. And why is that key? Well, it goes hand in hand as to why your bullpen's effective, right? Like if you have your 2 horses that are eating as many innings as these guys are, it is giving days off to certain guys in the bullpen. It's resting that bullpen. And it's the reason why I think a lot of those pitchers, including Rodriguez, is as effective as they are. And it's this sort of domino effect that begins with Webb as well as Robbie Ray and their ability not only to be amongst the league leaders in terms of ERA, but innings pitched is something that's very key to the success of those two as well.
No, again, you make a great point there on how it does preserve the bullpen. It makes life easier for the bullpen there. And we've seen in the past, Dan, that when they don't have starters who can cover those innings, I think it was 2023, the Giants had an incredibly good bullpen that year, but they ran out of starters. And so those relievers had to pick up more innings in the back half of the year, and using them as openers and whatnot. And you saw that bullpen kind of crater down the stretch in August and September. And it was one of the reasons why it made it all the more easier to move off of Gabe Kapler after that season there. And, that is why I think it's kind of incumbent on Buster to go out and find another starter to complement Webb and Ray because, Hayden Birdsong, I don't know how many innings you're going to be able to reliably get out of him for the foreseeable future. Now, Birdsong, he could lock in, he could find his command, but this is also his second full big league season. I don't know what the innings limit, if there even is an innings limit on Hayden Birdsong is. I mean, if you can get up to 150, that would be a lot probably. Landon Roop, same thing. You're probably looking more at 110, 120 innings out of those guys, and that's before you even get into the Justin Verlander thing. And I know you want to be patient with Justin Verlander, and he'll have his one more start against the Dodgers. And the Giants, they're going to keep Verlander in the rotation probably for the rest of the month, and they'll either make a move to bring someone else in and replace him, or he'll find himself, and the Giants will be able to count on him the rest of the way. It's going to be a fascinating month for Justin Verlander here, but at least he's got, Robbie Ray and Logan Webb, 2 days out of the week, able to hold things down to take that strain off of those other days.
Yeah, thank God. And getting back to Hayden Birdsong, it's getting sort of psychological with him. It's a little scary because it's almost Rick Ankiel-like, because he's getting to about the 4th or 5th inning, and then all of a sudden it just flares up.
Like clockwork, too. Yeah.
He can't find the plate. And you hope that this isn't something that suddenly becomes in between his ears where he's expecting. And when he loses it, he loses it. He's not even close. And trying to self-correct at the major league level, as you see him try to do, never works. I think the big question for me, Sam, going forward is that the question for the Giants isn't so much about the hitting, because I do believe, to your point about Adames and Chapman coming back, I do think that the hitting will get better. The question becomes, who's the third starter? Do you believe in Landon Root? Can Hayden Birdsong straighten things out, find his control? And can Verlander, do you still hold out hope that the 43-year-old can be at least a semblance of the Verlander that they thought they were getting? The question for me becomes, you go Logan Webb, Robbie Ray, who's number 3 from this point forward that you feel very comfortable with throwing out there when the playoffs begin and you got to reduce that rotation?
Yeah, so look right now, Landon Roop's got 85 innings so far this year. Justin Verlander's at 70. Hayden Birdsong is at 60. Again, we're about halfway through the year. Roop then was on a pace to hit about 160 innings. Birdsong, he's looking at more closer to 120. How close they get to that, though, remains to be seen. Is when you look at their overall career innings in which they've pitched. I don't think Birdsong has ever pitched more than 100 innings in any one year. You look at what he did as in the minor leagues in 2023. He pitched at 3 different levels, San Jose, Eugene, and Richmond, so low A, high A, and double A, and he threw 100 innings that year. Last year, across, he played for the big team, and he played for Richmond and Sacramento. Or sorry, he had 120 innings last year. He combined what he did at the minor leagues and the big league level. So he's been able to be stretched out a little bit. Will be interesting to see how close he gets to that number of 120. And then you look at Landon Root. Again, he did a couple years ago through 107 innings across, again, same thing, across 3 different levels. Last year with the Giants, he had about 50 innings with the Giants, and then another 20 to 30 innings in the minors. So he's almost at so Landon Root is approaching the number of innings that is his professional career high. Be interesting to see kind of how that looks going into the end of this month in August. Birdsong, he might be able to be stretched out just a little bit more this year. So they might be able to get those innings covered, but then it gets into the confidence issue, and can we rely on Birdsong to actually pitch high-quality innings in those appearances? And that's going to be where, again, I think it's being incumbent on not just him, but the coaching staff has to figure out a way to rediscover that confidence in him, because Birdsong is a guy who, that when he is right, looks like he could be a dominant force to top this rotation for years to come.
Yeah, it's not only the innings that you have to concern yourself about because they don't have any experience or anything to fall back on because they've never done it before, but the other thing they've never done is that should this be a team going down to the final days that's vying for a playoff spot, they have no experience in terms of playing in those big pressure moments.
Well, that's not a disqualifier. I mean, I remember. I remember a team 15 years ago that had a young starting staff with absolutely zero big game experience, and I'm obviously talking about the 2010 Giants who rode that inexperienced pitching staff to a World Series. And I think this team, they got enough veteran experience on this team to kind of pick up young guys like Birdsong and Roop in those high pressure situations at the end of the year. So I can absolutely, Roop and Birdsong are both, I think, good enough as pitchers to find the confidence that they want. I'm confident that they'll find their confidence. Then it's just a matter of, is there life in the arm at the end of the year when that confidence comes back? And
so really quick, your bigger concern of the 3 is the veteran.
I'm more concerned in Verlander, because I don't know how much gas is left in the tank. Verlander can go out and he knows what he needs to do. He's confident in his abilities, but the fact of the matter is, everyone's saying, he He's not pitching as bad as the numbers indicate, but he's still not pitching all that great. And it's the last few starts, there's been, the White Sox start, yeah, he got screwed over by the offense. But there's been a lot of starts where it's just like, no, Justin, that might have been on you, less so the team around you. So, again, we'll see how these next few starts go. I hope that he can finish out the year with the Giants, but when we're looking at what we've seen the last few weeks, it's concerning. It is absolutely concerning. What is not concerning, though, is how this show went. This is another fun one, Dan.
Absolutely.
So this has been the Orange and Black Weekend Wrap. Shout out to Zach and Risotto in the back for keeping everything going, pressing all the buttons. Giants in Sacramento for Game 2. If they win tonight, they win the season series against the Athletics for whatever bragging rights are on the line for that one. I know I'll be excited if the Giants beat the A's. I don't care where the A's are playing. That is still the interleague rival. I want the Giants to beat them. Absolutely sucks that they're in Sacramento and not Oakland where they belong, but Rob Manfred, John Fisher, Dave Cavill, they are all bad for baseball. Definitely boo them if you see them. But I'm not booing you guys, our listeners. I'm not booing any of our people here in the station. This is Sam Lubin for the Orange Black Weekend Wrap, and we will catch y'all on the next one.
Stop striking out. Advance the runner. Gee whiz.